I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. My name's Vanessa, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. A beautiful home in the suburbs of Seattle, a fulfilling career as an art teacher, and a husband of 12 years who I believed would never betray me. Funny how your entire world can shatter with just one phone call. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October when my cell phone rang. I was in the middle of grading student portfolios, my dining room, table covered with colorful sketches and paintings. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was local. I almost let it go to voicemail. I had so much work to finish before tomorrow's class, but something made me answer. "Hello, is this Mrs. Vanessa Mitchell?" A professional, female voice asked. "Yes, this is she," I replied, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I continued sorting through the artwork. "This is Diane Reynolds from Pacific Northwest Bank. I'm the branch manager. I need to speak with you regarding some recent activity on your joint savings account. Do you have a moment?" That's when I felt it, that subtle shift in the air when your instincts tell you something's wrong before your mind can process it. I set down the sketch I was holding, a tightness forming in my chest. "Yes, of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm calling because there's been a request to transfer a significant sum from your joint savings account, $387,000 to be exact. As this represents nearly the entirety of the account balance and is well outside your normal transaction, Patterns, our fraud prevention system, flagged it for review. Before proceeding, I wanted to verify that you're aware of and approve this transfer." The room seemed to tilt slightly. $387,000. Our life savings, the money we'd been accumulating for 15 years. Money for our retirement, for the dream vacation home in Oregon we'd been planning, for emergencies, for our future. I didn't authorize any transfer," I managed to say, my mouth suddenly dry. "Who requested it?" There was a slight pause on the line. The request came from the other account holder, Mr. Mitchell. The transfer was initiated online earlier today, with the funds to be wired to an account at First Regional Bank in Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix. My husband Ryan was supposed to be in Portland on a business trip. He'd left yesterday morning with his usual goodbye kiss and a promise to call me each night. What was happening in Phoenix? "Mrs. Mitchell, are you still there?" Diane's voice pulled me back to reality. "Yes, I'm here. Please don't allow that transfer," I said, my voice firmer now as shock gave way to alarm. "I don't know anything about this." "I understand. In cases of joint accounts, either party can typically authorize transactions, but given the unusual nature and amount, I had concerns. I'll place a temporary freeze on the account to prevent any outgoing transfers. However, I recommend you speak with your husband as soon as possible and then come into the branch so we can discuss how you'd like to proceed." I thanked her, my mind racing. As soon as the call ended, I dialed Ryan's cell. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I sent a text. "Need to talk ASAP. Emergency. Call me." No response. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and logged into our online banking. The transfer request was there, pending authorization. $387,000 to an account holder named Melissa Delgado. I didn't know anyone by that name. I tried to focus, to think clearly through the fog of confusion and rising panic. I called Ryan's office. "Good afternoon. Mitchell Consulting," his assistant Kevin answered. "Kevin, it's Vanessa. I need to speak with Ryan immediately." There was an awkward pause. "Vanessa? I thought you knew. Ryan took the week off. He said you both were going to Arizona for your anniversary getaway." Our anniversary was in April. It was October. "When did he tell you this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Last week. He seemed really excited about it. Said something. About a resort in Sedona? I thanked Kevin and hung up, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Sedona was less than 2 hours from Phoenix. Ryan wasn't on a business trip to Portland. He was in Arizona, attempting to transfer our entire life savings to someone named Melissa Delgado. I sat motionless at my dining room table, surrounded by my students' artwork depicting dreams and hopes and imagined futures, while my own future seemed to dissolve before my eyes. 12 years of marriage. 15 years together in total. I thought I knew this man better than I knew myself. The next hour passed in a blur as I moved on autopilot. I called the bank back and arranged to meet with Diane first thing tomorrow. I checked our credit card statements online and found charges I didn't recognize. A $12,000 purchase at a high-end jewelry store 3 weeks ago. Dinner reservations at restaurants I'd never heard of. Weekend getaways to Portland. Always when he told me he was working late or meeting clients. Then I found the email receipts in our shared cloud storage. Round-trip tickets to Phoenix. A reservation for 2 at Desert Lotus Resort and Spa in Sedona. A Valentine's Day weekend in Vancouver from earlier this year. A weekend Ryan had told me he was at a marketing conference in Chicago. It wasn't just the money, it was the lies. Years of lies, apparently. As the shock began to wear off, a cold, hard anger took its place. I texted Ryan one more time. I know about the money transfer. I know about Melissa. Don't bother coming home until you're ready to explain yourself. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down at my computer, and began to search for information about divorce attorneys in Seattle. The next morning dawned gray and misty, matching my mood perfectly. I hadn't slept much, tossing and turning as my mind cycled through disbelief, rage, heartbreak, and back again. Ryan still hadn't called or texted back. Part of me hoped there was some explanation, some reason that would make sense of all this, but the rational part of my brain knew better. I dressed carefully for my meeting with Diane, choosing a navy pantsuit that had always given me confidence when teaching workshops. I needed armor today, and this was the best I had. Pacific Northwest Bank was housed in a sleek glass building, downtown. As I waited in the lobby for Diane, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Ryan. But there was a text from my best friend Monica. Coffee this weekend? Need to hear all about your amazing students this semester. Monica didn't know yet. No one knew. Somehow telling others would make this nightmare real in a way I wasn't ready to face. Diane greeted me warmly, ushering me into her office with its view of Elliott Bay. She was a polished woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that now held sympathy. Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice, I said, taking the offered seat across from her desk. Of course, she replied. Have you been able to reach your husband? I shook my head. No, but I've confirmed he's not where he said he would be, and I don't know anyone named Melissa Delgado. Diane nodded, her expression carefully neutral. I understand this is a difficult situation, Mrs. Mitchell. I've placed a complete freeze on the joint account for now, which prevents any withdrawals or transfers by either party. However, that's only a temporary measure. You'll need to decide how you want to proceed. What are my options? I asked, grateful that my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Since it's a joint account, legally both you and your husband have equal access to the funds. Under normal circumstances, either of you could withdraw any amount. However, given the situation, I would recommend separating your finances as soon as possible. She outlined my options. I could open a new individual account and transfer half the funds there. I could seek a court order to freeze the assets pending divorce proceedings. I could try to negotiate with Ryan directly. Whatever you decide, Diane added. I would suggest consulting with an attorney who specializes in family law. Financial entanglements in marriages can be complex. As I left the bank an hour later, I had a new individual account with Pacific's, Northwest Bank and a recommendation for a well-respected divorce attorney named Rebecca Torres. The joint account remained frozen for now, a temporary dam holding back the flood of changes I knew were coming. I checked my phone again in the car. 3 missed calls from Ryan and a text. "It's not what you think. I can explain everything. Please call me back." I almost laughed. Not what I think? What else could it possibly be? But beneath the anger, a tiny part of me, the part that still remembered our first date at the art museum, his proposal on the ferry to Bainbridge Island, the way he'd held my hand through my father's funeral, that part wanted to believe there was an explanation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I started the car but didn't immediately drive away. Instead, I sat there, watching raindrops trace patterns down my windshield, and wondered how someone you've shared a bed with for 12 years, someone whose breathing patterns you know by heart, whose favorite foods you automatically add to the grocery list, whose moods you can read from the smallest change in expression, could become a stranger overnight. But Ryan hadn't become a stranger overnight, had he? The evidence suggested this had been going on for months, maybe years, which meant I'd been living with a stranger for longer than I realized. The thought made me feel hollow inside. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. This time I answered. "Vanessa, thank God. Please let me explain." "Where are you, Ryan?" I cut him off, my voice cold. A pause. "I'm in Arizona, but it's not." "With Melissa Delgado?" Another pause, longer this time. "Yes, but..." "And you tried to transfer our entire life savings to her?" "It's complicated. I needed..." "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with my own firmness. "Nothing about stealing our life savings is complicated. It's actually very simple. It's theft and betrayal." "Vanessa, please, if you'll just listen." "I've been listening to you for 12 years, Ryan. I'm done listening. I'm meeting with a divorce attorney tomorrow. Don't come home. I've already changed the locks." I hadn't, actually, but I would by the end of the day. "Please, Nessa," he said, using the nickname he'd given me when we were first dating. "Just give me a chance to explain in person. I'm coming home tonight." "If you come to the house, I'll..." "Call the police," I said, and was shocked to realize I meant it. "You can explain to my lawyer." I hung up before he could respond, before I could weaken. Then I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and cried for the first time since receiving Diane's call. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of me. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I'd planned, for the woman I used to be just 24 hours ago, who had no idea her life was about to implode. When the tears finally subsided, I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and started the car. I had calls to make, locks to change, and a new life to figure out. The old Vanessa might have waited for explanations, might have tried to understand, might have forgiven too easily. But this new Vanessa? She was done waiting for a man who could look her in the eye and lie for years. Done believing in someone who could try to steal their shared future. This new Vanessa was about to discover just how strong she could be, whether she was ready for it or not. Before my world shattered with that phone call, I thought I had it all figured out. Ryan and I met 15 years ago at a charity auction for the Seattle Art Museum. I was fresh out of art school, volunteering to help coordinate the event. He was there representing his family's small but growing marketing firm, looking to network with potential clients. When he bid on one of my paintings, an abstract piece I'd donated, I was flattered but suspicious. Later, he confessed he didn't even like abstract art. He just wanted an excuse to talk to me. Our courtship was like something out of a romantic comedy. Weekend hiking trips to Mount Rainier, surprise. Picnics at Golden Gardens Park, long conversations about art and life over coffee at a tiny cafe in Pike Place Market. When he proposed on the Bainbridge Island ferry with the Seattle skyline glittering behind him, I didn't hesitate to say yes. He was thoughtful, ambitious, and made me feel like the most important person in his world. We bought our first home, together in Ravenna, a charming craftsman with a backyard studio where I could paint. Ryan took over his parents' marketing firm when they retired to Florida, expanding it into Mitchell Consulting. I split my time between teaching art at Lakeside Community College and creating my own pieces for local galleries. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable and, more importantly, we were saving for our dreams. Every month without fail, we'd each deposit a portion of our income into our joint savings account. We talked about eventually buying a vacation home on the Oregon coast where we'd spent our honeymoon. We dreamed of early retirement, of traveling the world together, of having the financial freedom to pursue our passions without worry. That account represented more than money. It was the physical manifestation of our shared future, our trust in each other, our partnership. Our life together had a comforting rhythm. Sunday mornings we'd walk to our favorite breakfast spot, Maple Leaf Cafe, where the owner Greta would have our usual orders ready: sourdough toast with avocado and poached eggs for me, challah French. Toast with bacon for Ryan. Weeknight dinners were often simple meals at home, talking about our days across the dining table. I'd refinished myself. Summers meant weekend trips to Lake Chelan or the San Juan Islands. Winters were spent cozied up at home or skiing at Stevens Pass. My friends envied what they saw as a perfect marriage. "You guys still look at each other like you're on your first date," my best friend Monica would say. Even my skeptical sister, Natalie, who'd been through 2 divorces herself, would comment on how annoyingly in sync Ryan and I seemed to be. And we were in sync, or so I thought. We rarely fought, and when we did, it was usually over something trivial like whose turn it was to clean out the gutters or whether we should replace the aging dishwasher now or wait until it completely died. We resolved conflicts quickly, usually with one of us bringing home the other's favorite dessert as a peace offering. Looking back now, I wonder if our lack of serious disagreements was actually a warning sign, not of harmony, but of avoidance. Did we ever really tackle the hard stuff? Or did we just smooth things over, maintaining the appearance of a perfect marriage while cracks formed beneath the surface? There were signs, of course. There always are, though they're so much easier to identify in hindsight. Like the way Ryan's business trips gradually increased in frequency over the past 2 years. At first, it was once every few months, then monthly, then sometimes twice in a single month. I was proud of how successful his company was becoming. Didn't that benefit us both? When he'd return home tired and distant, I attributed it to exhaustion, from traveling and the pressure of growing his business. Or the way our intimate life had changed. Not just the frequency, though, that had certainly decreased, but the quality. There was a mechanical feel to our interactions, a sense that Ryan was going through the motions. When I brought it up once, he blamed stress and promised things would improve once the company was more stable. I believed him because I wanted to, because questioning further would have meant acknowledging that something fundamental had shifted between us. Then there were the small lies that I now realize were practice for bigger deceptions. "I already ate lunch," he'd say, but I'd find receipts for restaurants in his jacket pocket. "I'll be home by 7, but he wouldn't arrive until after 9, offering vague explanations about client meetings running long. I chose to trust rather than investigate, to accept rather than challenge. Wasn't that what a supportive spouse did? The weekend before Diane's call, Ryan and I had attended a dinner party at Monica and her husband Pete's home. It was a lovely evening, good food, better wine, conversation that flowed easily among old friends. Ryan was charming as always, telling amusing stories about difficult clients, refilling everyone's glasses before they could ask, complimenting Monica on her cooking. When she mentioned an upcoming art exhibition that featured one of my former students, Ryan put his arm around me and said, "I couldn't be prouder of the influence Vanessa has on young artists. She's the real talent in this family." Monica pulled me aside later while we were cleaning up the kitchen. 12 years and he still adores you, she said. Pete and I will be lucky to have half of what you guys have when we hit that milestone. I smiled and thanked her, feeling a flush of pride and gratitude. That moment in Monica's kitchen was the last time I felt secure in my marriage, in my understanding of my own life. The morning Ryan left for what he claimed was a business trip, to Portland, everything seemed normal. He packed his usual Navy carry-on suitcase, kissed me goodbye at the door, and reminded me to water the fiddle-leaf fig tree in the living room, a running joke since I'd nearly killed the last 3 plants we'd owned. Don't forget to call me. Tonight, I said as he loaded his suitcase into his car. I won't, he promised, giving me one last kiss. Love you, Nessa. Love you too, I replied. Good luck with the Westbrook pitch. There was no Westbrook pitch. There was no business trip to Portland. There was only a web of lies so intricate I'm still untangling it weeks later. The day after I confronted Ryan on the phone, I met with Rebecca Torres, the divorce attorney Diane had recommended. Her office was in a converted Victorian house in Capitol Hill, warm and inviting despite the serious business conducted there. Rebecca herself was a straight-talking woman in her 40s with a reputation for being tough, but fair. Based on what you've told me, she said after I'd explained my situation, we have grounds for filing on the basis of abandonment and financial misconduct. The attempted transfer of joint assets without your knowledge or consent is a significant factor in your favor. What about the other woman? I asked, still unable to say mistress out loud. Adultery can be grounds for divorce in Washington, but it's typically not a factor in the division of assets unless marital funds were used to support the extramarital relationship. Which, in your case, she added, glancing down at her notes, appears to be exactly what happened. She outlined a strategy. Gather evidence of Ryan's financial infidelity. Document all assets. Secure temporary orders regarding the frozen bank account, and file for divorce before Ryan returned to Seattle. The goal is to protect your interests while we work toward a fair division of marital property, Rebecca explained. Given the circumstances, fair may not mean equal, not when one party has demonstrably violated the financial trust of the marriage. I left her office with a thick folder of documents to review and forms to fill out, plus a list of recommended forensic accountants who could help trace where our money had gone over the past few years. The administrative tasks gave me something concrete to focus on, a way to channel the emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. That evening, as I sat at my dining room table organizing financial documents, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Vanessa. This is Melissa Delgado. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand about the situation with Ryan. I stared at the message, my heart pounding in my ears. Melissa Delgado, the woman Ryan had tried to transfer our life savings to. The woman he was with in Arizona right now. The woman who, according to my preliminary search online, was a 28-year-old real estate agent in Phoenix with a dazzling smile and a social media presence full of luxury vacations and designer clothes. My finger hovered over the block button. I didn't owe this woman anything, certainly not a conversation, but curiosity, and perhaps a masochistic need to understand the full extent of Ryan's betrayal, made me respond, "What could you possibly have to say that would matter to me?" Her reply came quickly. Your husband isn't who you think he is, and neither am I. I put the phone down like it had burned me. What did that even mean? Was this some kind of mind game? Ryan had always been protective of his phone, but I'd never suspected anything sinister about it. Now I wondered what secrets it might contain. As if on cue, my laptop pinged with an email notification. It was from Ryan with the subject line, "Please read this before you do anything." Attached was a document titled Explanation PDF. With shaking hands, I clicked to open it, both dreading and needing to know what possible justification he could offer for his actions. As the file loaded, I steeled myself for more lies, more manipulation, more betrayal. What I read instead turned everything I thought I knew about my marriage and my husband completely upside down. The PDF loaded slowly, as if my laptop itself was reluctant to reveal its contents. Ryan's explanation began with a paragraph that made my stomach drop. Vanessa, by the time you read this, you'll have discovered what probably looks like the worst kind of betrayal. I know you must hate me right now, and you have every right to. But before you proceed with divorce or any legal action, there are things you need to know about me, about Melissa, and about why I did what I did. It's not an affair. It's much more complicated than that. I nearly closed the document right there. More lies? More manipulation? But something compelled me to keep reading. What followed changed everything I thought I knew about my husband of 12 years. According to Ryan, 2 years ago, his marketing firm was approached by a man named Victor Calhoun, the CEO of a tech startup called NextGen Solutions. The company claimed to be developing revolutionary AI software for medical diagnostics. Victor wanted Ryan's firm to handle their branding and marketing campaign for an upcoming product launch. The contract was massive, nearly $1 million. By far, the largest Mitchell Consulting had ever been offered. I was ecstatic, Ryan wrote. This was the kind of opportunity that could take the company to the next level. The contract had unusual terms, a significant upfront payment, strict confidentiality clauses, and accelerated timelines. But the money was too good to pass up. I signed without digging as deeply as I should have. 6 months into the project, with branding materials developed and marketing campaigns ready to launch, Ryan received a visit from FBI agent Melissa Delgado. She wasn't a real estate agent in Phoenix. She was an undercover federal agent investigating Victor Calhoun and NextGen Solutions for wire fraud and investment scams. The company's revolutionary AI software didn't exist. It was all an elaborate front to defraud investors. Agent Delgado showed me evidence that NextGen had been using our marketing materials to solicit millions in investments for a product that would never materialize. Our work, my work, was being used to legitimize a massive fraud operation. Worse, because I'd signed those contracts, Mitchell Consulting was legally entangled with NextGen. I could potentially face criminal charges as an accomplice. The FBI offered Ryan a deal. Work with them to gather evidence against Calhoun and his associates, and he would be granted immunity from prosecution. The alternative was potential criminal charges, financial ruin, and the end of his company. I agreed to help them, Ryan continued. For the past 18 months, I've been working as a confidential informant, feeding information to the FBI while maintaining my relationship with NextGen. The business trips were often meetings with Agent Delgado or operations to gather evidence. I couldn't tell you. They made it clear that the fewer people who knew, the safer everyone would be. Victor Calhoun has connections to dangerous people. If he discovered I was working with the FBI, it wouldn't just be my career at risk. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the document. This couldn't be real. My husband, a confidential informant for the FBI? It sounded like the plot of a thriller movie, not my life. Yet, as I continued reading, details emerged that made horrible sense, explaining Ryan's increased absences, his distraction, the strange phone calls that would end abruptly when I entered the room. The operation was supposed to conclude months ago, but the investigation kept expanding as the FBI discovered more conspirators and more victims. Last week, they finally had enough evidence to move forward with arrests. But then something went wrong. Someone tipped off Calhoun that the FBI was closing in. Victor called me in a panic, saying he needed to secure assets before things fell apart. He demanded I help him move money through various channels. The FBI saw this as an opportunity to gather final evidence against him by tracking the money transfers. They created a plan. I would agree to help Calhoun, but we would use our own savings account as a temporary holding place for some of the funds. The money would go in and out within hours, all tracked by the FBI, creating a clear money trail they could use as evidence. Agent Delgado set up a receiver account in her undercover name that would appear legitimate to Calhoun's people. I was supposed to transfer the money, let the FBI document everything, and then the funds would be immediately returned to our account. Plus, an additional $50,000 as compensation for our cooperation. It was temporary and supervised by federal agents. Our savings were never supposed to be at risk. Then everything went sideways. Calhoun must have gotten suspicious or received another tip-off. He disappeared 12 hours before the scheduled arrests. The FBI believes he fled the country. The entire operation fell into chaos. Agent Delgado and I had to accelerate our timeline. That's why I tried to make the transfer when I did. We needed to move quickly before Calhoun's network could dismantle the evidence trail. I was assured our money would be safe. What I didn't count on was the bank calling you. I should have anticipated that. It was a stupid oversight on my part, and for that, I'm truly sorry. By the time I realized what had happened, you'd already frozen the account, and everything spiraled out of control. I sat back in my chair, my mind reeling. Could this possibly be true? Or was this the most elaborate lie ever created to cover up an affair and attempted theft? The final paragraphs of Ryan's explanation addressed this exact doubt. I know this all sounds incredible. You probably think I'm making up an outlandish story to cover for an affair. I don't blame you for being skeptical. That's why I've attached contact information for Agent Delgado's supervisor at the FBI field office in Seattle. His name is Special Agent Thomas Warren. Call him. He'll confirm everything I've told you. I can't come home yet. With Calhoun in the wind, the FBI has me. In a temporary safe location until they can be sure I'm not in danger, Agent Delgado is with me as my protection detail, not as my mistress. There has never been anything romantic between us. She's a federal agent doing her job, and she's engaged to a professor at ASU. I know I've broken your trust in the worst possible way by keeping all this from you. I thought I was protecting you. I realize now that was both arrogant and misguided. You deserve to know the truth from the beginning, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right, if you'll let me. I love you, Vanessa. I have never stopped loving you. Please call Agent Warren before you make any decisions. Ryan. At the bottom of the document was a phone number, email address, and badge number for Special Agent Thomas Warren. I closed my laptop and walked to the kitchen in a daze. My hands moved automatically, filling the kettle, preparing a cup of tea I knew I wouldn't drink. My mind was churning, trying to process everything I'd just read. If Ryan was telling the truth, then my husband wasn't a cheating thief. He was an idiot who got in over his head with criminals, then tried to fix it by becoming an FBI informant without telling me. He'd kept me in the dark for almost 2 years, lying about where he was going and what he was doing, all while putting himself in potential danger. If he was lying. Well, this was the most elaborate deception I'd ever encountered. I picked up my phone and stared at the contact information for Agent Warren. One call could potentially verify everything. But did I even want to know? Part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, pack a bag, and just drive. Anywhere. Away from this nightmare my life had become. Instead, I found myself dialing the number. Special Agent Warren, a deep voice answered on the third ring. My name is Vanessa Mitchell, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My husband is Ryan Mitchell. He says you can verify some information for me. There was a brief pause on the line. Mrs. Mitchell. Yes, I've been expecting your call. This line isn't secure. Can you come to our field office tomorrow morning? Say, 9 a.m. You know who I am? I asked, caught off guard. Yes, ma'am. Your husband has been a valuable asset in an ongoing investigation. There's a lot we need to discuss, but I'd prefer to do it in person. I agreed to the meeting and hung up, my thoughts spinning faster than ever. The fact that Agent Warren, knew who I was and didn't seem surprised by my call lent credibility to Ryan's story. But I'd been fooled before. I wouldn't fully believe anything until I had concrete proof. That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned, running through scenarios in my mind. If Ryan was telling the truth, what did that mean for us? Could I forgive the lies, even if they weren't the kind I initially suspected? And if this FBI angle was somehow an elaborate hoax, though I couldn't imagine how or why, what would my next move be? By morning, I was exhausted but resolved. I showered, dressed in a simple black dress with a gray cardigan, and drove downtown to the FBI field office. The building was nondescript, with tight security. I gave my name to the receptionist and was escorted to a small conference room where a tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair waited. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Special Agent Thomas Warren. Thank you for coming in." I shook his hand, studying his face for any sign that this was all an act. His expression was professional, unreadable. "I'm here because I don't know what to believe anymore," I said flatly. "My husband claims he's been working with the FBI as an informant and that a woman named Melissa Delgado is an undercover agent, not his mistress. He tried to transfer our life savings to her account as part of some operation. Is any of that true?" Agent Warren gestured for me to sit, then took the chair across from me. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm going to be direct with you. Yes, your husband has been working with us as a confidential informant for approximately 18 months. Agent Delgado is indeed an FBI agent who is assigned to this case. The operation involving your joint savings account was authorized by this office, though I'll admit it didn't go as planned." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "So he's not having an affair?" "Not with Agent Delgado, no. Their relationship is strictly professional. In fact, one of the reasons we selected her for this assignment was her engagement to a civilian with no connections to this case. It made her cover story more convincing. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Relief that Ryan hadn't betrayed me in the way I thought. Anger that he'd kept me in the dark about something so significant, fear about the danger he might be in. "Where is my husband now?" I asked. Agent Warren's expression turned grave. "For his own protection, we've moved him to a secure location. The primary target of our investigation, Victor Calhoun, is still at large and poses a potential threat to anyone who helped build our case against him. Your husband provided crucial evidence." "Is Ryan in danger?" "We don't have specific intelligence suggesting an imminent threat, but we're taking precautions. That's standard procedure in cases like this." I nodded, trying to absorb it all. "And our money? The transfer that was attempted?" That was part of a controlled operation to track financial movements within Calhoun's network. The plan was for the funds to be returned immediately, plus compensation for your husband's cooperation. When the transfer was flagged and the account frozen, it complicated matters. However, I can assure you that your savings are not at risk. If necessary, the Bureau can provide documentation for your bank, confirming this was part of a federal investigation. It all aligned with what Ryan had told me, yet I still felt like I was in a twisted dream. My ordinary life as an art teacher, married to a marketing executive, had somehow morphed into this espionage thriller. "When can I see him?" I asked finally. Agent Warren hesitated. "That's partly why I wanted to meet with you in person, Mrs. Mitchell. There's been a new development in the case. We've received intelligence that Calhoun may have returned to Seattle. If that's true, both you and your husband could be at risk." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for your safety, we'd like to bring you to the same secure location where your husband is staying, just until we can apprehend Calhoun and neutralize any threat." I stared at him, the full weight of the situation finally hitting me. "You want me to go into hiding? Leave my job, my home, my life? Just like that?" "I understand it's a lot to process," Agent Warren said, his tone softening slightly. "But yes, That's what I'm recommending. We can have an agent escort you home to pack some essentials, but we should move quickly. I looked down at my hands, noticing they were trembling. One phone call from a bank manager had set off a chain of events that now threatened not just my marriage, but potentially my safety. The normal life I thought I was living had been an illusion. Beneath the surface, danger had been growing for months without my knowledge. "Mrs. Mitchell," Agent Warren said gently, "Vanessa, I know this is overwhelming, but I need your decision. Will you come with us?" I looked up at him, suddenly aware that the path I chose in this moment would irrevocably change the course of my life. "I need to speak with my husband first," I told Agent Warren, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Before I make any decisions about going into hiding or protective custody, I want to talk to Ryan directly." Agent Warren nodded, as if he'd anticipated this request. "That can be arranged. We have secure communication protocols in place." He pulled out his phone, stepped into the hallway for a moment, then returned. "We're setting up a video call. Now, it'll be a few minutes." While we waited, I tried to organize my thoughts. My anger at Ryan hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had transformed into something more complex. He hadn't betrayed me with another woman, but he had kept me in the dark about a situation that potentially endangered both of us. He'd made unilateral decisions that affected our marriage, our finances, our safety. A laptop was brought in and set up on the conference table. Agent Warren stepped back. "I'll give you some privacy. The call is secure, but please avoid discussing specific locations or operational details." When the video connected, Ryan's face filled the screen. He looked tired, his usual meticulously styled hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing a plain gray t-shirt I didn't recognize, sitting in what looked like a basic hotel room. "Vanessa," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank God. Are you okay?" "Am I okay?" I repeated, a surge of anger cutting through my confusion. "No, Ryan, I'm not okay. I thought my husband was having an affair and stealing our life savings. Now I find out he's been working as an FBI informant against dangerous criminals without telling me. I'm about as far from okay as I can possibly be." He winced. "I deserve that. I deserve all of it. I'm so sorry, Nessa." "Don't call me that," I snapped. "Not right now. I need answers, Ryan. Real ones. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Start with how you got involved with this Calhoun person in the first place." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times during our marriage. "It was about 2 years ago. Mitchell Consulting was doing well, but I was ambitious, wanted to grow faster. When Victor Calhoun approached us, with this massive contract for NextGen, it seemed like a gift from the universe. A tech startup with revolutionary medical AI? It was exactly the kind of high-profile client I'd been hoping for. He explained how Calhoun had been introduced through a mutual business contact, how the initial meetings had seemed completely legitimate. NextGen had impressive offices in South Lake Union, professionally designed prototype demonstrations, and a team of apparent experts. The red flags were there, Ryan admitted. The pressure to sign quickly, the unusual payment structure, the strict confidentiality clauses. But I was so excited about the opportunity that I rationalized everything away. By the time Agent Delgado approached me, we were 6 months into developing their branding and marketing materials. Our work was already being used to solicit investments. "And you never thought to tell me any of this?" I asked. "Even after you found out it was a fraud? Even after you agreed to work with the FBI?" Ryan looked away from the camera for a moment. At first, I was ashamed. I'd made a terrible mistake that could have destroyed our company, maybe even resulted in criminal charges against me. Then, when I agreed to work with the FBI, they strongly advised keeping the circle of knowledge as small as possible. They said it was safer for you not to know. That if Calhoun or his associates ever suspected I was informing, they might try to get information from you. Oh, so you lied to me for my own protection? The words came out bitter. That's paternalistic bullshit, Ryan. We're supposed to be partners. You don't get to decide what risks I should know about, especially when they affect my life too. You're right, he said simply. I was wrong. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was also protecting myself from having to admit I'd messed up, from seeing disappointment in your eyes. It was cowardly, and I'm sorry. His direct admission caught me off guard. I'd expected more justifications, more defenses. His straightforward acknowledgement of fault momentarily deflated my anger, leaving room for all the other emotions swirling beneath. Fear, confusion, grief for the uncomplicated life I'd thought we had. Agent Warren says you're in danger, I said after a moment. That this Calhoun person might be back in Seattle. Is that true? Ryan's expression turned grim. We don't know for certain, but there's credible intelligence suggesting he returned to tie up loose ends. That could include dealing with people who might testify against him. Like you. Like me, he confirmed. And potentially you, now that you're connected to all this. I closed my eyes, trying to process it all. My life had fundamentally changed in the span of 48 hours. The foundation I thought was solid had turned out to be built on quicksand. What do you think I should do? I asked, opening my eyes again. Warren wants me to go into protective custody, wherever you are. Ryan leaned closer to the camera. I want you safe, Vanessa. If the FBI thinks protective custody is necessary, I hope you'll consider it. But I also know this isn't a decision I get to make for you. Not anymore. Whatever you decide, I'll support it. His answer surprised me again. The Ryan I knew, or thought I knew, would have insisted, would have tried to persuade or even manipulate me into doing what he thought was best. This new humility, this deference to my autonomy, was unexpected. If I come, I said slowly, it doesn't mean everything is fixed between us. I'm still angry. I still feel betrayed. I know, he said quietly. I don't expect forgiveness, at least not right away. Maybe not ever. But I do want a chance to show you that the man you married is still here. Beneath all the mistakes and bad decisions, I'm still the person who loves you more than anything in this world. I felt tears building and blinked them back. I need to think. Can I call you back through Agent Warren in a little while? Ryan nodded. Of course. Take whatever time you need. I'll be here. After the call ended, Agent Warren returned to the conference room. Have you made a decision, Mrs. Mitchell? I need some air, I said. Can we go somewhere I can think? He led me to a small courtyard in the center of the building, secure, but open to the sky. Seattle's perpetual drizzle had paused, leaving behind that fresh, clean scent that always follows rain in the Pacific Northwest. I sat on a bench, Agent Warren keeping a respectful distance but remaining within sight. My mind raced through options. I could refuse protective custody, return to my normal life, and hope that this Calhoun person had no interest in me. I could file for divorce anyway. Ryan had still lied to me for months, still broken my trust. Or I could go with the FBI, join Ryan in hiding, and figure out what remained of our marriage once we were both safe. None of these choices felt right. None of them led to a future I could clearly envision or desire. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Monica. Haven't heard from you in days. Everything okay? Dinner tonight? Monica, my best friend for 15 years. The person who'd helped me through my father's death, who'd celebrated every career milestone with me, who knew me sometimes better than I knew myself. I couldn't just disappear without a word to her. But I also couldn't tell her the truth without potentially endangering her too. I stared at her message, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Agent Warren approached cautiously. "Mrs. Mitchell? I don't mean to rush you, but if we're going to move you to the safe location, we should do it soon. Staying in one place too long increases risk." I looked up at him. "If I go with you, what happens to my life here? My job? My friends? Do I just vanish without explanation?" "We can help craft a cover story," he said. "A family emergency, perhaps, requiring an extended absence. The protective custody is temporary, just until we apprehend Calhoun. Then you can return to your normal life." "And if you don't apprehend him? How long could temporary be?" Warren's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There were no guarantees. I thought about my students at the college, the exhibition of their work scheduled for next month that I'd been helping organize. I thought about the morning walks with my neighbor's dog that I'd been doing while she recovered from hip surgery. I thought about the small, ordinary pieces of my life that I'd always taken for granted. "I need to go home first," I said finally. "If I'm going to disappear for an indefinite period, there are things I need to take care of." Agent Warren frowned. That's not advisable, Mrs. Mitchell. If Calhoun is monitoring your movements—" "1 hour," I interrupted. "Give me 1 hour at my house with an agent present if necessary. Then I'll go wherever you think is safest." He considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "1 hour, I'll send 2 agents with you. Pack only essentials, nothing that would look suspicious if someone was watching the house." The drive home was tense, with 1 FBI agent in the passenger seat beside me and another following in a separate vehicle. They'd instructed me to act, normally as if I was simply returning from errands. No hurried movements, no looking around anxiously. If anyone was watching, we didn't want to alert them that something was amiss. Inside my house, I moved methodically. Clothes for different weather conditions, toiletries, my prescription medications, my tablet loaded with books. The female agent, Miller, helped me select items that wouldn't suggest a long absence. A small duffel bag that could be for an overnight trip or gym clothes. My laptop was deemed too risky. The FBI would provide a secure device if I needed one. As I moved through the rooms of my home, I was struck by how foreign it all suddenly seemed. The artwork Ryan and I had collected over the years, the comfortable furniture chosen together, the photographs of happier times. It all felt like it belonged to someone else, to a life I no longer recognized as my own. In my studio, I paused. In front of an unfinished painting, a landscape of the Oregon coast, where Ryan and I had talked about buying our vacation home someday. I'd started it weeks ago, before my world imploded. Now I wondered if I'd ever complete it. With a sudden impulse, I slipped my smallest sketchbook and a few pencils into my bag. Whatever happened next, I would need the solace of creating. 10 minutes remaining, Mrs. Mitchell, Agent Miller reminded me gently. I nodded, moving to my bedroom to retrieve a small wooden box from my nightstand drawer. Inside were a few pieces of jewelry with sentimental value. My grandmother's pearl earrings, the silver bracelet Ryan had given me on our 5th anniversary. Practical items with monetary value that could be useful if needed, but also tangible connections to the life I was temporarily leaving behind. As I tucked the box into my bag, I caught sight of the framed photo on my nightstand, Ryan and me. On Mount Rainier, windblown and laughing, the vast landscape spreading out behind us. It had been taken 3 years ago, during a period I now understood was before all this began, when our marriage was still what I thought it was. Without overthinking it, I removed the photo from the frame and slipped it into my sketchbook. "Mrs. Mitchell," the mail agent called from the living room. "It's time." I took one last look around our bedroom, trying to memorize every detail. Then I zipped up my bag, straightened my shoulders, and walked out, not knowing when, or if, I would return. In the car, Agent Miller handed me a burner phone. "For emergency contact only. Your regular phone needs to be left behind," It could be traced. I nodded, sending one final text to Monica before surrendering my phone. Unexpected family emergency. My cousin in Chicago had an accident. Flying out tonight, not sure when I'll be back. Will call when I can. Love you. It wasn't completely a lie. This was an emergency, and it did involve family, just not the family member or location I'd indicated. The guilt of the deception weighed on me, but I understood the necessity. As we pulled away from my house, I didn't look back. Looking back felt too much like saying goodbye, and I wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, I stared straight ahead, toward whatever uncertain future awaited. "Where are we going?" I asked Agent Miller. "To a private airfield," she replied. "From there, a plane will take us to the safe location. For security reasons, I can't tell you the destination until we're airborne." I nodded, surprisingly calm now that the decision had been made. The initial shock had worn off, leaving behind a strange, detached clarity. One thought kept circling in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The life I thought I had, the perfect marriage, the supportive husband, the secure future, had been partly an illusion. What would rise from its ashes remained to be seen. As Seattle's familiar skyline receded in the distance, I found myself wondering not just about my safety or my marriage, but about who I would become through this ordeal. The Vanessa who boarded this car was not the same woman who had answered the bank manager's call 2 days ago. Already I was changing, adapting, finding strength I hadn't known I possessed. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers or revelations awaited, I would face them with my eyes open. No more comfortable illusions, no more unquestioning trust. From now on, I would write my own story, with or without Ryan by my side. The small plane landed at a private airstrip in northern Idaho just as the sun was setting. I hadn't known our destination until we were airborne, when Agent Miller finally told me we were headed to a remote cabin property owned by the Bureau through various shell companies. The location was known only to a handful of people within the FBI. "It's off-grid but comfortable," she explained as we drove from the airstrip in a nondescript SUV. "Solar power, satellite internet for essential communications, well water. The nearest town is about 40 miles away." I nodded, watching through the window as dense pine forests replaced the familiar landscapes of the Pacific Northwest. The scenery grew increasingly wild and isolated with each passing mile. Finally, after nearly an hour on progressively smaller roads, we turned onto a gravel driveway that wound through the trees. The cabin came into view, larger than I'd expected, with a wraparound porch and large windows facing a small lake that glimmered in the last light of day. It looked like a luxury vacation rental, not the stark safe house I'd imagined. "Home sweet home," Agent Miller said with a small smile. "At least temporarily." As we approached, the front door opened and Ryan stepped out onto the porch. Behind him stood a woman I recognized from my online searches, Melissa Delgado. Seeing her in person was jarring, even knowing now that she wasn't Ryan's mistress. She was shorter than I'd expected, with her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a plain button-down shirt. Nothing like the glamorous social media photos I'd found. Ryan started down the steps toward me, then hesitated, clearly unsure of his welcome. I felt similarly frozen, not knowing how to greet this man who was simultaneously my husband of 12 years and a stranger who'd been living a double life. Agent Miller saved us from the awkward moment. "Let's get inside and secure the perimeter. Explanations and reunions can happen once we're settled." The next hour was a blur of security protocols and orientation. The cabin had 3 bedrooms, one for Ryan and me, though no one explicitly said we'd be sharing, one for Agent Delgado, and one for Agent Miller. The male agent who'd accompanied us from Seattle departed after helping secure the premises. There were rules. No unsupervised communications with the outside world. No leaving the property without an escort. No unnecessary lights after dark. Regular check-ins with field headquarters would happen via secure satellite phone. If we needed supplies, a list would be sent ahead, and an agent would deliver them on a randomized schedule. "How long will we be here?" I asked during a lull. In the instructions. Agent Delgado exchanged a glance with Miller. "That depends on how quickly we can locate Calhoun. The task force is working around the clock, but he has resources and connections that make him difficult to track." "Days? Weeks?" I pressed. "It could be weeks," she admitted. "Possibly longer." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mitchell. I know this isn't what you signed up for." I almost laughed at the understatement. No, being hidden away in an Idaho forest with FBI agents and a husband I barely recognized was definitely not what I'd signed up for when I married Ryan. After the agents showed me to the master bedroom and left me to unpack my meager belongings, I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past 48 hours was fading, leaving me hollow. A soft knock on the door roused me. Ryan stood in the doorway, keeping a respectful distance. "They're making dinner," he said. "Nothing fancy. Just pasta. Are you hungry?" I nodded, though food was the last thing on my mind. "I'll be out in a minute." He lingered a moment longer. "Vanessa, Thank you for coming. I know you had every reason to walk away." "I didn't come for you," I said quietly. "I came because trained federal agents told me I was in danger. Don't mistake self-preservation for forgiveness." He nodded, accepting this without argument. "That's fair. I'll see you in the kitchen." Dinner was a strained affair. Agent Miller tried to maintain conversation with questions about my work as an art teacher, while Delgado focused on her meal, occasionally checking her phone for updates. Ryan remained mostly silent, stealing glances at me when he thought I wouldn't notice. After we'd eaten, Delgado suggested we all get some rest. "Tomorrow morning, we'll have a more comprehensive briefing. Mrs. Mitchell deserves to understand exactly what situation she's in." I spent the night on the bedroom's window seat, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moonlight on the lake rather than sharing the bed with Ryan. He took the bed without complaint, keeping to one side as if leaving. Space for me should I change my mind. I didn't. The next morning, after a quiet breakfast, we gathered in the cabin's living room. Delgado had set up a small projector connected to a laptop. "I think it's time you understand the full scope of what your husband has been involved in," she said, addressing me directly. "Not just for your safety, but because you deserve to know the truth." What followed was a detailed presentation on Victor Calhoun and his criminal enterprise. It wasn't just a simple investment scam, as I'd initially understood. Next-Gen Solutions was merely the legitimate face of a complex operation that included money laundering, tax fraud, and connections to organized crime groups across multiple countries. "Calhoun is what we call a facilitator," Delgado explained, showing slides of a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. "He creates seemingly legitimate businesses that serve as conduits for illegal money. The technology sector is perfect for this. Lots of investment capital flowing into speculative ventures with few tangible products required up front." She clicked to the next slide, a complex web of companies and individuals. Ryan's marketing firm appeared near the top, highlighted in yellow. "Your husband's company was brought in to create the veneer of legitimacy. High-quality marketing materials, professional branding, impressive presentations, all to convince investors that NextGen was the real deal. The problem was, your husband was too good at his job." Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me. The materials Mitchell Consulting created were so convincing that Calhoun was able to secure over $30 million in investments, far more than he'd initially planned. That success led him to expand the operation, bringing in more conspirators and targeting larger institutional investors. The next slide showed photographs of various men and women, some in business attire, others more casually dressed. These are some of Calhoun's associates. Several have known connections to organized crime families in Eastern Europe. When the operation grew, it attracted more dangerous players. I glanced at Ryan, who was staring at the floor, his face pale. "Did you know?" I asked him. "Did you know who these people really were when you signed that contract?" "No," he said quietly. "Not at first. I thought Victor was just an ambitious entrepreneur. By the time I realized how deep it went, I was already implicated." That's when Agent Delgado approached me. Delgado nodded. "Your husband's cooperation has been invaluable. He's helped us identify key players, document financial transactions, and build a case that could potentially dismantle not just NextGen, but several connected criminal enterprises." "At what cost?" I asked. "His safety? Our marriage? Our life savings?" "Your money was never at risk," she assured me. "The transfer was monitored and would have been reversed immediately. What we didn't anticipate was the bank contacting you directly, though in retrospect we should have." "And our safety now? Is that at risk?" Delgado's expression turned serious. "Until we apprehend Calhoun, yes. He's aware that someone close to him has been feeding information to federal authorities. He may not know it's Ryan specifically, but he's paranoid and has resources to investigate. That's why we moved both of you to this location." As she continued explaining the case, showing financial records, surveillance photos, and transcripts of recorded conversations, a pattern began to emerge, one that extended beyond Calhoun's criminal enterprise to my own marriage. Ryan had always been drawn to impressive facades. His marketing firm specialized in making companies look bigger and more successful than they were. Our home in Ravenna, while beautiful, had stretched our budget when we first bought it. He drove a car that projected success to clients. Even our social life revolved around creating the right appearances. Dinner parties with the right people, vacations that would make compelling social media posts. It wasn't that Ryan was shallow or materialistic exactly. It was that he believed deeply in the power of presentation. "Perception creates reality," he'd often say when discussing his marketing strategies. He genuinely believed that if you projected success convincingly enough, success would follow. Looking at Calhoun's operation laid out in front of me, I could see why Ryan had been vulnerable to it. NextGen had offered the ultimate canvas for his talents, a chance to build a brand from the ground up, with a seemingly unlimited budget and high-profile connections. It would have been irresistible to him. And when it all started to unravel, when he discovered the truth, his instinct had been to fix it himself rather than confide in me. To protect the facade of our perfect life, to shield me from his mistakes, to maintain the image of the successful, capable husband who never failed. It was the same pattern that had defined our marriage in subtler ways, the tendency to emphasize the positive, to minimize problems, to present a curated version of our relationship to the world and sometimes to each other. "Vanessa?" Agent Delgado's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Do you have any questions about what I've shown you?" I looked up, realizing the presentation had concluded while I was lost in my revelation. "No," I said slowly. "I think I understand now." After the briefing, I found myself drawn to the lake. Despite the agent's warnings about staying close to the cabin, they allowed me to sit on the small dock as long as I remained in sight of the house. The October air was crisp, the water still and reflective. I heard footsteps on the wooden planks behind me and knew without turning that it was Ryan. He sat down beside me, leaving space between us, his legs dangling over the edge of the dock like mine. "What are you thinking?" he asked after a long silence. I continued staring at the water. "I'm thinking about patterns, how we create them, how we get trapped in them, how hard they are to break." What patterns do you mean? In your work with Calhoun, in our marriage, the pattern of creating perfect facades to hide complicated realities. He was quiet for a moment. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. All those years, I said, finally turning to look at him. When I thought we had this perfect marriage, this perfect life, how much of it was real, Ryan? How much was just another marketing campaign? He flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. I've made mistakes, huge ones, but my love for you was never fake, never part of some image I was trying to project. Wasn't it, though? The successful businessman, the beautiful home, the devoted wife, it all fit the narrative you wanted to live. And when reality threatened that narrative, when you got involved with criminals, when you realized you were in danger, you didn't trust me enough to include me in the truth. You just created a new narrative that kept me in the dark. I was trying to protect you, he said. But the argument sounded hollow, even to him, I could tell. You were trying to protect your image of yourself, I countered. The hero who fixes everything, who never admits failure, who carries burdens alone because asking for help would show weakness. Ryan stared out at the lake, his jaw tight. I could see I'd hit a nerve. You know what scares me most about all this? I continued. It's not Calhoun or his criminal friends. It's that I don't know if I ever really knew you. 12 years of marriage, and you were capable of living a double life for 18 months without me suspecting a thing. What does that say about how, well, I actually know you? You do know me, he insisted, turning to face me fully. This situation, it's extreme, exceptional. It doesn't define who I am or what our marriage was. Doesn't it? Extreme situations don't create character, Ryan. They reveal it. He had no response to that. We sat in silence as the sun began to set, painting the lake in shades of orange and gold. A pair of loons called to each other across the water, their mournful cry echoing through the trees. I don't know what happens next, I finally said. I don't know if there's a way forward for us after this. There is, Ryan said quietly. If you want there to be. I've made terrible mistakes, but I want to make things right. However long it takes, whatever I need to do. I stood up, brushing off my jeans. First, we need to survive this. Everything else. That's a decision for later. As I walked back to the cabin, I felt Ryan watching me. I didn't look back. The patterns we'd established over 12 years of marriage couldn't be broken in a single conversation. If there was any hope for us, it would require more than apologies and promises. It would require fundamental change from both of us. Inside, Agents Delgado and Miller were in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones that ceased when I entered. Their expressions told me something had happened. What is it? I asked, suddenly alert. Miller glanced at Delgado, who nodded. We've received intelligence, Miller said. Calhoun was spotted in Seattle yesterday near your home. He had someone with him. We believe it was his security chief, a man with a history of violence. A chill ran through me. They were at our house? Looking for us? We think so, Delgado confirmed, which means you were right to come with us when you did. You might have returned home to find them waiting. As Ryan came in from the dock, Delgado filled him in on the development. His face hardened, and I saw a flash of something I rarely witnessed in my husband, raw fear. What does this mean for the investigation? He asked. It means Calhoun is getting desperate, Delgado replied. He's taking risks, becoming more visible. That could work in our favor if he makes a mistake. Or it could mean he's escalating, Miller added grimly, becoming more dangerous. I looked around at their tense faces, the reality of our situation hitting me anew. This wasn't just about a marriage in crisis anymore. This was about survival. That night, as I prepared for another uncomfortable sleep on the window seat, Ryan knocked gently on the bedroom door frame. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "Something I should have told you the moment you arrived." The gravity in his voice made me pause. "What is it?" "Calhoun doesn't just want me because I could testify against him. He's looking for something specific, something he thinks I have." "What?" Ryan took a deep breath. "Evidence of his connections to people much more powerful than him. Politicians, judges, corporate executives who've been helping launder money through his companies. Names that would send shockwaves through Washington and Wall Street if they came to light. Do you have this evidence?" "Yes," he said simply. "It's my insurance policy, the reason I'm still alive. And it's the real reason we're here, in this cabin, under FBI protection." I stared at him, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "The FBI doesn't know you have it, do they?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face at my intuition. "No. They suspect I might have something, but they don't know what exactly or where it's hidden." "Why are you telling me this now?" Ryan's expression was deadly serious. "Because if something happens to me, you need to know where it is. You need to know how to use it to keep yourself safe." And in that moment, I realized that despite everything, despite the lies and betrayal, Ryan was still trying to protect me. Not just from the truth this time, but from a very real danger that might outlive him. "Tell me," I said. "It's in our house," Ryan said, lowering his voice though we were alone in the bedroom. "Hidden in plain sight, where no one would think to look for digital files." I stared at him incredulously. "You left incriminating evidence against dangerous criminals in our house? The same house Calhoun was just spotted visiting?" "It's not that simple," Ryan explained. "The evidence isn't physically there in a way anyone could find by searching. It's encrypted and embedded within one of your paintings." "My paintings?" I repeated, stunned. Ryan nodded. "The abstract piece in your studio, the one you were working on last month. The blue and green swirl that reminded you of the Oregon coast. I modified it while you were at the faculty meeting that weekend." I remembered the painting clearly, a 30x40-inch canvas with layers of blues and greens in a flowing pattern that had indeed been inspired by our trips to the Oregon coast. I'd left it to dry one weekend while attending an all-day faculty planning session at the college. "How did you modify my painting?" I asked, trying to understand. "I used steganography. It's a technique for hiding data within image files. In this case, I photographed the painting, embedded the encrypted files within the digital image, then printed the altered image on canvas. I stretched it over your original painting while maintaining the exact appearance. To the naked eye, or even under close inspection, it looks identical to your original work. The only difference is that the new canvas contains embedded data that can be extracted with the right software and decryption key." My mind reeled at the ingenuity and the audacity of his plan. So the evidence is hidden in a literal piece of art. I don't know whether to be impressed or furious. "You can be both," Ryan said, with a hint of the wry humor that had been absent since this ordeal began. "I deserve the fury, but the plan itself is solid. No one looking for digital evidence would think to check artwork. And even if they suspected, they'd need specialized equipment and the decryption key to access the data." "What exactly is this evidence? What does it show?" Ryan's expression darkened. "Financial records, emails, recorded conversations, proof that Calhoun's operation extends to people in the highest levels of government and business. We're talking about a federal judge in Seattle, 2 state senators, a deputy mayor, and executives at 3 Fortune 500 companies. People who were not only turning a blind eye to Calhoun's money laundering but actively participating in it." I sat on the edge of the bed, absorbing the magnitude of what he was telling me. "And the FBI doesn't know you have this?" "Not specifically, no. They know I gathered evidence while working as an informant, but they think I've turned everything over. This?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. This is material I collected on my own, outside the bounds of my official cooperation. Why keep it from them? Wouldn't it help their case? Ryan sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. It's complicated. The FBI's focus is on Calhoun and his immediate criminal network. There are political considerations when it comes to going after public officials and powerful business leaders. I was concerned that if I turned over everything, the higher-ups might bury the more sensitive connections. So it's your insurance policy, I said, understanding dawning. Protection against both Calhoun and potentially the FBI itself. Exactly, Ryan confirmed. As long as certain people believe I have this information, they have reason to keep me alive, and to eventually let us return to our normal lives once Calhoun is apprehended. But if something happens to me, then I need to know how to access it, I finished his thought. But why tell me now? Why not when we were still in Seattle? Because I didn't want to burden you with this unless absolutely necessary. And because he paused, looking uncomfortable. Because I wasn't sure if you'd stay with me after learning about everything. I thought you might file for divorce and walk away. You'd have been safer not knowing. I considered his words, recognizing both the protective instinct and the continuing pattern of making decisions for me rather than with me. But now wasn't the time to revisit that argument. How do I access the evidence if I need to? I asked instead. Ryan explained the process in detail, the specific software needed, the location of the decryption key, hidden in plain sight within the metadata of a seemingly innocuous family photo in our cloud storage, and the secure email addresses of journalists and law enforcement officials not connected to the current investigation who could be trusted with the information if necessary. Memorize these steps, he urged. Don't write them down. If anything happens to me, wait until you're somewhere secure, then access the evidence and send it to those contacts immediately. Don't try to leverage it on your own. That would be too dangerous. Just release it and let the information do its work. I committed the instructions to memory, repeating them back to Ryan to confirm I had everything correct. As an art teacher, I had a good visual memory, a skill that now might prove vital for our survival. There's one more thing, Ryan added, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small leather pouch and handed it to me. Inside was a simple silver pendant on a chain. This contains a backup of the decryption key. It looks like ordinary jewelry, but inside is a micro SD card. If anything happens to our cloud storage, this is an alternative way to access the evidence. I slipped the necklace over my head, tucking it beneath my shirt. The weight of the pendant against my skin felt like a physical manifestation of the responsibility I now carried. Thank you for trusting me with this, I said quietly. Ryan looked genuinely surprised. Of course I trust you, Vanessa. That's never been in question. Hasn't it? You kept me in the dark about everything else. That wasn't about trust, he insisted. It was about protection, misguided as that was. I've always known that if there was one person in this world I could count on completely, it's you. His words stirred a confused mix of emotions, anger at his past deceptions, appreciation for his current honesty, and an unexpected warmth at the faith he still placed in me despite the fractures in our relationship. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. Agent Miller stood in the doorway, her expression tense. Sorry to disturb you, but we just received an update from headquarters. There's been a development. We followed her to the living room, where Agent Delgado was speaking rapidly on the satellite phone. She ended the call as we entered. What's happened? Ryan asked. Delgado's expression was grave. Calhoun's security chief, Anton Resnick, was found dead in a hotel room in Bellevue an hour ago. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. Ryan blanched. Calhoun is tying up loose ends. That's our assessment as well, Delgado confirmed. He's eliminating anyone who might connect him to the crimes or testify against him. Does that include us? I asked, though I already knew the answer. You're at the top of his list, Miller said bluntly. Especially Ryan, given his role as an informant. That's why this safe house is so isolated, and why its location is known to only a handful of people within the Bureau. A heavy silence fell over the room as the reality of our situation sank in deeper. We weren't just hiding from a white-collar criminal. We were hiding from a man who was willing to murder his own associates to protect himself. There's more, Delgado added after a moment. The task force raided one of Calhoun's shell companies in Tacoma today. They seized computers and documents, but Calhoun himself wasn't there. However, they found evidence suggesting he's looking for something specific, something he believes Ryan has. Ryan and I exchanged a quick glance, an unspoken agreement passing between us to keep our earlier conversation private. What kind of evidence? Ryan asked, his voice carefully neutral. They didn't specify over the comm, Delgado replied. Just that Calhoun appears desperate to recover some form of data or documentation. Does that mean anything to you? Ryan shook his head with convincing casualness. I turned over everything I collected as part of my cooperation agreement. If he thinks I have something else, he's mistaken. I marveled at how easily the lie slipped from his lips, another reminder of how effectively he'd maintained his double life for months. Yet this time, I was complicit in the deception, equally committed to keeping the secret of the hidden evidence. As the agents discussed increased security measures and changes to the communication schedule with headquarters, I found myself withdrawing into my thoughts. The stakes had escalated dramatically in the span of a single conversation. Not only was my marriage in crisis, but now I was jointly responsible for evidence that could potentially bring down powerful people, evidence that made us targets for a killer. Later that night, unable to sleep despite my exhaustion, I sat on the window seat watching the moonlight on the lake. Ryan had offered to take the couch in the living room, giving me the bedroom to myself, but I'd declined. Despite everything, there was a strange comfort in having him nearby. Even if we weren't speaking, I heard him stir in the bed. Vanessa, are you okay? No, I answered honestly. I don't think I've been okay since I got that call from the bank. He was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about patterns. You were right. I've spent my life creating perfect facades, controlling narratives. When things went wrong with Calhoun, my instinct was to handle it alone, to fix it without admitting failure. And now? I asked. Now I realize how much damage that instinct has caused. To us? To our marriage? I can't fix this alone, and pretending I can would only make things worse. His admission surprised me. It showed a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected. I've been thinking too, I said slowly, about patterns of my own. I've spent our entire marriage accepting your version of things, never pushing past the surface when something felt off. I was comfortable in the life we built, and I didn't want to risk disrupting it by asking difficult questions. That's on me, not you, Ryan insisted. I gave you no reason to doubt. Maybe, but relationships aren't one-sided. We both contributed to the dynamic that brought us here. As we lapsed into silence again, I found myself reaching a decision. If we survived this, if we made it back to our normal lives, things would have to change fundamentally. Whether that meant saving our marriage or ending it, the patterns that had defined our relationship could no longer continue. But first, we had to survive. And the more I thought about our situation, the more I realized that passively waiting in this cabin, hoping the FBI would capture Calhoun before he found us, felt increasingly precarious. Ryan, I said suddenly, the evidence in the painting. Could it be used to lure Calhoun into a trap? He sat up in bed, fully alert now. What are you thinking? If Calhoun is desperate to find whatever you have, maybe that's our leverage. Instead of hiding and hoping he doesn't find us, what if we controlled the situation? What if we used the evidence as bait? That would be incredibly dangerous, Ryan said. though I could see he was considering the idea. And the FBI wouldn't approve it. They'd see it as unnecessary risk. Do we need their approval? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. This is our lives at stake. And from what you've told me, we have something both Calhoun and the FBI want. That gives us power. Ryan studied me with a mixture of admiration and concern. When did you become so strategic? When I realized that waiting for others to solve our problems might get us killed, I replied. Look, I'm not suggesting we go vigilante and hunt down Calhoun ourselves, but maybe there's a way to be more proactive, to help shape how this ends instead of just hiding and hoping. Ryan got out of bed and came to sit across from me on the window seat. In the moonlight, his face looked both familiar and strange. My husband, yet also this man I was only beginning to truly know. Tell me what you're thinking, he said, in detail. As the night deepened around us, we began to formulate a plan, not just for survival, but for taking back control of our lives. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something beyond fear and anger, a sense of purpose, of agency. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be a passive participant in my own story. The old Vanessa, the one who accepted facades and avoided confrontation, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone willing to fight not just for her survival, but for the truth, whatever that might mean for her marriage and her future. By the time dawn broke over the lake, casting the water in shades of pink and gold, we had the outline of a plan. It was risky, audacious, and would require deceiving the very FBI agents tasked with protecting us. But if it worked, it could end this nightmare once and for all. Are you sure about this? Ryan asked as we watched the sunrise together. Once we start, there's no going back. I touched the silver pendant hidden beneath my shirt, feeling its weight against my skin, the physical embodiment of the truth we were now both protecting. I'm sure, I said. It's time to stop hiding and start fighting back. Implementing our plan proved more difficult than conceiving it. The first major obstacle was the constant supervision of Agents Delgado and Miller. They maintained a rotating watch schedule, ensuring that at least one of them was always alert and monitoring the property. Their vigilance, while intended for our protection, made it nearly impossible to act without scrutiny. We need privacy to access the cloud storage, Ryan whispered as we prepared breakfast the next morning. Agent Miller had stepped outside to make her regular check-in call with headquarters while Delgado was showering. If they see what we're doing, they'll shut it down immediately. I nodded, keeping my voice equally low. What about tonight? They have to sleep sometime. They alternate 4-hour shifts at night. The changeover happens at midnight and 4 a.m. There's usually about 10 minutes when they're both moving around, debriefing each other. 10 minutes isn't much time, I murmured, arranging blueberry pancakes on a plate with deliberate casualness as Agent Miller returned from her call. Time for what? She asked, immediately alert to our hushed conversation. For these pancakes to get cold, I improvised smoothly. Better eat up while they're hot. Miller gave us a look that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. This was our second challenge. These weren't ordinary protection officers, but highly trained FBI agents, sensitive to any change in behavior or suspicious activity. Our plan had multiple phases. First, we needed to verify the evidence was still intact in our cloud storage and create a copy with a digital beacon, a tracker that would alert us when the files were accessed. Next, we needed to leak information about the evidence's existence, to draw out Calhoun, while simultaneously alerting specific trustworthy FBI officials outside the current task force. Finally, we needed transportation to execute our part of the trap, which meant somehow leaving the cabin without our protective detail. Each step presented its own set of obstacles. That afternoon, Ryan managed to create a diversion. While helping Delgado inventory our food supplies in the kitchen, he accidentally knocked over a container of flour, creating a mess that briefly occupied both agents. In that short window, I used the satellite internet connection in the living room to access our cloud storage. The family photo Ryan had described was still there. With trembling fingers, I examined its metadata, finding the hidden information exactly where he'd said it would be. I copied the decryption key to a secure note on the burner phone the FBI had provided me, disguising it as a grocery list. Before I could do more, Agent Miller returned to the living room. I quickly switched screens to a digital book I'd been reading. "Everything okay?" she asked, her eyes moving suspiciously between me and the laptop. "Just stretching my legs," I replied, closing the computer. Reading in the bedroom was making me stiff. Later that evening, as we played cards at the kitchen table, a forced attempt at normalcy that felt anything but, Ryan tried to gain information that might help our plan. "How long until the FBI expects to locate Calhoun?" he asked Delgado, arranging his cards with casual precision. She hesitated, clearly weighing how much to share. "The task force is pursuing several leads. They've frozen most of his known accounts and have surveillance on his properties and known associates." "But no direct sightings since Seattle?" I pressed. "Nothing confirmed," Miller interjected, though there was a possible sighting at the Canadian border yesterday. Ryan and I exchanged a quick glance. If Calhoun was attempting to flee the Isaboya country, our window of opportunity was shrinking. "Is there any way I could help?" Ryan asked. "I know his habits, his patterns of behavior. Maybe there's something I noticed during my time with NextGen that could help narrow down his location." Delgado studied him thoughtfully. "Actually, yes. The task force has compiled locations associated with Calhoun, properties, businesses, even restaurants he frequents. Having you review the list might help prioritize surveillance resources." This was exactly the opening we needed, access to information about where Calhoun might be found. Ryan maintained an expression of helpful cooperation, betraying none, of the strategic advantage this offered our plan. As the night deepened and the card game wound down, the next challenge emerged. Agent Miller received a call that sent her into the bedroom for privacy. When she returned, her expression was grim. "There's been another development," she announced. "Calhoun accessed one of his emergency accounts 3 hours ago. A significant cash withdrawal was made from a bank in Coeur d'Alene." Delgado straightened. "That's less than 100 miles from here." "Headquarters doesn't believe it's a coincidence," Miller continued. "They think he may have information about this safe house." My blood ran cold. Coeur d'Alene was the nearest city of any size to our remote location. If Calhoun was there, we were in immediate danger. "Are we being relocated?" Ryan asked, voicing the question in my mind. "Not yet," Delgado replied. "Moving now might make you more vulnerable if he's watching roads out of the area. Additional agents are being dispatched as backup. They should arrive by morning. Until then, we're implementing lockdown protocols. These included closing all window blinds, restricting movement to essential activities only, and preparing go bags in case rapid evacuation became necessary." The cabin's comfortable atmosphere transformed instantly into a tense fortress. This unexpected development threw our carefully constructed plan into chaos. If additional agents arrived by morning, our already limited freedom of movement would be further restricted. Yet Calhoun's proximity also presented an opportunity. If he was truly nearby, perhaps we could use that to our advantage. As we helped secure the cabin, following the agent's instructions to move furniture against exterior doors and windows, Ryan and I communicated through meaningful glances and brief touches, a squeeze of the hand, a tap on the shoulder, developing a silent language of strategic adjustments. When the initial security measures were complete, Agent Miller stationed herself near the front entrance while Delgado went to conduct a perimeter check. In the momentary privacy, Ryan grabbed my arm gently. "We need to accelerate the timeline," he whispered urgently. "Once backup arrives, we'll lose any chance to implement our plan." I nodded. Tonight, then? During the midnight shift change? It's our only window. I'll create the digital beacon while Delgado's outside. Be ready. The next few hours passed with excruciating slowness. We were directed to sleep fully clothed, with shoes nearby for immediate evacuation if necessary. The agents maintained heightened alertness, checking in with headquarters every 30 minutes. I lay on the bed, feigning sleep while actually running through every detail of our plan, identifying potential, failure points, and contingencies. Ryan had taken the window seat, also pretending to rest while keeping watch on the terrain outside through a small gap in the blinds. At 11:45 p.m., I heard Miller's soft knock on the door. "Shift change in 15 minutes, she murmured. "Everything quiet?" "All clear," Ryan responded. No movement outside. As her footsteps retreated, Ryan turned to me. "It's now or never," he whispered. "Are you still sure about this?" I sat up, already fully dressed and alert. "I'm sure. What about the digital beacon?" "Done. I managed to set it up while you were in the shower earlier. If anyone accesses the file, we'll know immediately." We waited, counting down the minutes, listening to the subtle sounds of the cabin, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the heating system, the soft murmur of the agents' voices as the midnight shift change approached. At 11:58, we heard Delgado emerge from her bedroom. Miller met her in the hallway, and their voices drifted toward us as they began their handover briefing. Ryan slipped from the window seat, retrieving the burner phone he'd modified earlier, from beneath the mattress. This was another risk we'd taken, altering the FBI-issued device to allow for unsupervised communications. If discovered, it would immediately raise alarms. "Ready?" he mouthed silently. I nodded, my heart pounding so loudly I feared the agents might hear it. The success of our plan hinged on perfect timing and the one advantage we had. The agents believed we were cooperative, frightened civilians who would follow their protection protocols without question. We moved silently to the bedroom window, the one furthest from where the agents were conducting their shift change. Earlier, while helping secure the cabin, Ryan had deliberately left this window's lock slightly disengaged, though the blinds were closed to maintain appearances. With practiced ease born from our hours of whispered planning, I slid the window open while Ryan disabled the makeshift alarm they'd rigged, a water glass balanced on the sill that would fall and shatter if the window moved. He carefully removed it, placing it on the nightstand. The cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and the distant call of an owl. Freedom and danger, just inches away. Ryan went first, easing his body through the opening with minimal noise. I followed, heart racing as I navigated the narrow space. My foot caught on the sill, causing a slight scraping sound that seemed deafening in the silent night. We froze, waiting to see if the agents had heard. After 10 agonizing seconds of silence, Ryan helped me the rest of the way out, and we carefully closed the window behind us, leaving it unlocked for our potential return. The night was moonless, providing essential cover as we crept away from the cabin. Ryan led the way, following a path we'd memorized from studying the property during daylight hours. Our destination was the boathouse at the lake's edge, where we'd discovered a small motorboat during an FBI-supervised walk the previous day. Every step carried dual risks: detection by the agents sworn to protect us, or ambush by Calhoun's people if they truly had located the safe house. We moved with agonizing slowness, pausing frequently to listen for any sound of pursuit or danger ahead. The boathouse loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the slightly lighter darkness of the lake. As we approached, Ryan suddenly grabbed my arm, pulling me down behind a fallen log. "Movement," he breathed in my ear, barely audible. "By the dock." I strained my eyes, eventually discerning what Ryan had spotted: a human figure moving near the boathouse, the occasional glint of metal suggesting a weapon. My blood froze. If Calhoun had found the safe house and stationed men around the property, Our plan had just become infinitely more dangerous. Worse, we'd left the cabin unprotected, potentially leading danger straight to our FBI protection. FBI or Calhoun's, I whispered. Can't tell, Ryan replied. But either way, we can't use the boat now. This was our first major setback. The boat had been crucial to our plan, our means of reaching the nearest town where we could implement the next phase without the FBI's knowledge. Plan B? I asked, mentally reviewing our contingencies. Ryan nodded grimly. The maintenance shed might have keys to the property vehicles. It's risky, closer to the cabin, but it's our only option. Now, we began a careful retreat, skirting the lake in a wide arc to approach the maintenance shed from the opposite direction of both the cabin and the compromised boathouse. Every sound, a twig snapping beneath our feet, the rustle of our clothing, even our breathing, seemed amplified in the silent forest. As we neared the shed, a new sound cut through the night. Voices from the cabin, raised in alarm. The agents had discovered our absence. We have minutes at most, Ryan warned as he worked the lock on the shed door. His marketing executive hands seemed surprisingly skilled at the improvised lockpicking, using a multi-tool he'd pocketed from the kitchen earlier. The lock gave way with a soft click, and we slipped inside the musty space. Ryan immediately began searching for keys while I kept watch through a grimy window, monitoring both the cabin and the boathouse. Found them, Ryan whispered triumphantly, holding up a ring of keys. And better yet, there's an ATV parked behind the shed. It'll be noisy, but faster than anything they could use to pursue us. As if on cue, flashlight beams cut through the darkness around the cabin as Delgado and Miller began a systematic search of the property. Their shouts carried clearly across the still night. Mitchell, Vanessa, this is dangerous. Come back immediately. We had seconds to decide. Once on the ATV, we'd announce our presence to everyone within hearing distance, both the FBI and whoever was watching from the boathouse. But hesitation meant certain capture. Let's go, I said, making the decision. Whatever happens next, at least we're doing something instead of just waiting to be found. Ryan nodded, a mix of pride and worry in his eyes. Stay close to me, no matter what happens. We slipped out the back of the shed, where the ATV waited like a crouching animal in the shadows. Ryan inserted the key while I climbed on behind, him wrapping my arms tightly around his waist. The familiar solidity of him was strangely comforting, despite everything. As Ryan started the engine, its roar shattering the night silence, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. A figure running from the boathouse toward us, and flashlights from the cabin swinging in our direction. Go! I shouted over the engine's noise, and Ryan gunned the throttle. We surged forward into the darkness, away from the cabin and the lake, following a maintenance trail that led toward the main road. Behind us, shouts and the crack of what might have been gunfire added urgency to our escape. As we raced through the forest, the cool night air whipping past us, I realized we had crossed a point of no return. We were no longer just hiding from danger. We were racing headlong toward it, deliberately placing ourselves in harm's way in the hope of ending this nightmare once and for all. Whether we were being incredibly brave or foolishly reckless remained to be seen. But for the first time since this ordeal began, we were taking control of our own fate. Whatever happened next would be on our terms, not Calhoun's, and not the FBI's. As the trail widened and the lights of the main road appeared, ahead, I tightened my grip around Ryan's waist. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, despite the fractures in our marriage, we were in this together now. Two people against formidable enemies, armed with nothing but determination, a digital key, and a desperate plan that might save us or get us killed. The ATV roared along the forest trail for nearly 20 minutes before we reached the main road, a remote 2-lane highway winding through the Idaho wilderness. By then, the sounds of pursuit had faded, though whether that meant we'd outrun them or they were simply regrouping with vehicles of their own remained uncertain. Ryan killed the engine as we reached the highway, the sudden silence disorienting after the constant mechanical growl. "We need to ditch this," he said, gesturing to the ATV. "It's too easily connected to the cabin." "And then what?" I asked, climbing off on shaky legs. The adrenaline rush of our escape was beginning to fade, leaving me acutely aware of the cold night air and our precarious position. We're miles from anywhere, in the middle of the night, with who knows who chasing us. Ryan checked the modified burner phone. "We've got a signal barely. According to the map, there's a truck stop about 5 miles south of here. If we can get there, we might find transportation, or at least a place to regroup." 5 miles on. Foot? In the dark? "We follow the highway but stay in the trees," Ryan said, already pushing the ATV off the road and into the dense underbrush. "It's not ideal, but it's our best option." After concealing the vehicle as best we could, we began our trek south, keeping the highway in sight while remaining hidden among the trees. The going was difficult. Uneven terrain, fallen branches, and the constant need to stay alert for signs of pursuit or wildlife. I was grateful for the sturdy hiking boots I'd packed for the safe house, one of the few practical items I'd had the foresight to bring. We walked in silence for nearly an hour, each lost in our own thoughts. The gravity of what we'd done, escaping, federal protection, potentially exposing ourselves to Calhoun's people, weighed heavily on me. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty was a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time since this ordeal began, we were acting rather than reacting. "Do you think the FBI will understand why we left?" I asked finally, my voice hushed despite the distance we'd put between ourselves and the cabin. Ryan glanced back at me, his face barely visible in the darkness. "Understand? Maybe eventually. Forgive? That depends on how this ends. Right now, they probably think we've either lost our minds or been abducted. Or that you've been working with Calhoun all along and I'm just a naive accomplice," I added. "That too," he acknowledged grimly. "But once they realize we went voluntarily, they'll focus their resources on finding us. They'll monitor transportation hubs, check rentals, maybe even get warrant access to card transactions, which is why we need to be very careful about how we proceed." The truck stop appeared ahead just before 3 a.m., a fluorescent-lit oasis in the darkness, with a handful of semi-trucks parked in the expansive lot. An all-night diner attached to a gas station and convenience store provided our first potential point of contact with the outside world. We paused at the edge of the forest, observing the truck stop for signs of danger. A few drivers moved between the diner and their vehicles, but nothing seemed suspicious. "How's our cash situation?" I asked, aware that credit cards were now off-limits if we wanted to avoid detection. Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of bills. "I've been keeping emergency cash hidden since this whole thing started. About $2,000. Not enough for what we need, but it's a start." I raised an eyebrow. "Another secret?" "A precaution," he corrected. "One I'm glad I took." I couldn't argue with that. "What's our next move?" "We need transportation and a secure way to access the internet. The plan only works if we can control when and how Calhoun learns about the evidence." We decided to split up temporarily. Ryan would go into the convenience store for supplies while I entered the diner to assess transportation options. This way, if one of us was recognized or captured, the other might still escape. "Be careful," Ryan said, squeezing my hand before we separated. "Anyone could be working for Calhoun or the FBI." "You too," I replied, surprised by the surge of concern I felt for him despite everything. The diner was nearly empty, just a tired-looking waitress behind the counter, a pair of truckers nursing coffee at the far end, and a middle-aged woman working on a laptop in a corner booth. I slid into a booth with a clear view of both exits and the parking lot outside. The waitress approached with a pot of coffee and a weary smile. "Rough night, hun?" she asked, eyeing my disheveled appearance with mild concern. "Car trouble," I replied with the cover story Ryan and I had agreed upon. "My husband's checking if the station has the part we need." She nodded sympathetically and poured me a cup without asking. "On the house. You look like you need it." "Thank you," I said, genuinely grateful for the small kindness. "Do you know if any of the truckers might be heading toward Spokane? We're trying to get to my sister's place." "Let me ask around," she offered. "A lot of the overnight hauls go that direction." As she moved away to speak with the truckers, I sipped the coffee, strong, bitter, and exactly what I needed to clear my head. Through the window, I could see Ryan in the convenience store, methodically gathering items while maintaining a casual demeanor. The waitress returned a few minutes later. "You're in luck. Bernie over there is heading to Spokane in about an hour. Says he can give you and your husband a lift if you don't mind riding in a big rig." I felt a surge of relief. "That would be amazing. We'd be happy to pay for his trouble." She introduced me to Bernie, a gruff but kindly man in his 60s with a salt and pepper beard and weathered hands. "Don't worry about payment," he said after hearing our car trouble story. "Company pays for my fuel, and I could use the conversation to stay awake. Nothing more boring than night driving on empty highways." Ryan joined us shortly after, carrying a backpack filled with supplies. He seamlessly adopted our cover story, thanking Bernie profusely for the offered ride. Within the hour, we were climbing into Bernie's truck, a massive vehicle that would take us across state lines without requiring ID or leaving an electronic trail. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, we crossed into Washington state. Bernie was an ideal driver for our purposes, talkative enough to seem friendly, but respectful of our obvious fatigue. We offered just enough details about our fictitious car trouble and sister in Spokane to satisfy his curiosity without raising suspicions. "You two can catch some sleep if you want," he offered as the morning progressed. "I'll wake you when we get near Spokane." The offer was tempting. We'd been awake for over 24 hours at this point, but neither of us felt safe enough to truly sleep. Instead, we dozed in fitful intervals, one always remaining alert while the other rested. During one of these quiet moments, with Bernie focused on the road and Ryan appearing to sleep beside me, I contemplated how drastically my life had changed in less than a week. From art teacher to fugitive, from trusting wife to suspicious partner, from passive bystander to active participant in a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Yet amid the chaos and danger, I'd discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The woman who had answered that fateful call from the bank manager seemed like a stranger now, someone who had accepted limitations and half-truths without question, who had built her life around someone else's narrative. Ryan stirred beside me, his eyes opening to meet mine. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, communicating without words. Despite everything, we were allies in this moment, bound by shared danger and a common goal. Whether that alliance would survive beyond the current crisis remained to be seen. Bernie dropped us at a shopping mall on the outskirts of Spokane around noon, believing we were meeting my sister there. We thanked him sincerely, offering some cash that he refused multiple times before reluctantly accepting for his grandkids. As his truck rumbled away, we were once again on our own, but now in a populated area with resources we could use. Our next step was to secure more private transportation and establish a base of operations. "We need allies," Ryan said as we walked through the mall, blending with the lunchtime crowd. "People Calhoun wouldn't connect to us, but who have resources we can use." "I might know someone," I said slowly, an idea forming. "My college roommate Lizzie lives in Spokane. She's a computer security consultant now, works remotely for tech companies. She might be able to help us with the digital aspects of the plan." Ryan looked surprised. "You've kept in touch?" "Christmas cards, Occasional emails. We were close once. I didn't add that the friendship, like many others, had faded during my marriage to Ryan. Another casualty of the isolated life we'd gradually created. Can you trust her? More than I can trust most people right now, I replied with pointed honesty. She has no connection to our life in Seattle. No way Calhoun could have her on his radar. Ryan nodded slowly. Reaching out to anyone is a risk, but we need technical expertise. Do you have a way to contact her that won't alert the FBI? Using a prepaid phone purchased at the mall, I called Lizzie's personal number from memory, praying it hadn't changed in the years since we'd last spoken. Hello? The familiar voice that answered sent a wave of relief through me. Lizzie? It's Vanessa Mitchell. I know this is completely out of the blue, but I'm in trouble and I need help. There was a pause, then, Vanessa, are you okay? What kind of trouble? The kind I can't discuss over the phone, I said carefully. I'm in Spokane with my husband. We need a place to stay where no one would look for us, and we need your expertise with something technical. Another pause, longer this time. Then, to my immense relief, give me your location. I'll come. Get you. 90 minutes later, we were sitting in Lizzie's home office in a modest house on the north side of the city. She'd changed little since our college days, still petite with wild curly hair, now streaked with premature gray, and intense eyes, behind stylish glasses. After an initial awkward reunion, we'd explained our situation in broad strokes. Ryan's involvement with Calhoun, the FBI protection, and our decision to take matters into our own hands. Let me get this straight, Lizzie said, leaning back in her ergonomic chair. You want to use this evidence as bait to lure a dangerous criminal into a trap without the knowledge or support of the FBI agents assigned to protect you? That's the simplified version? Yes, Ryan admitted. That's either the bravest or stupidest plan I've ever heard, she replied bluntly. Probably both. We don't have much choice, I explained. As long as Calhoun is free, we'll never be safe. And the longer this drags on, the more likely he'll either find us or escape the country entirely. Lizzie studied me intently. You've changed, Vanessa? The girl I knew in college would never have taken a risk like this. The past week has been transformative, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. She nodded, seeming to come to a decision. Okay, I'll help you. But we do this my way, with proper security protocols. And if at any point I think you're in imminent danger, I'm calling the FBI myself. Deal? Ryan looked like he wanted to object to the conditions, but I spoke first. Deal. Over the next several hours, Lizzie helped us refine our plan, bringing her technical expertise and objective perspective to our hastily conceived escape. With her secure equipment, we were able to access our cloud storage and verify the evidence was intact. She then helped us create a more sophisticated digital beacon that would not only alert us when the files were accessed, but would provide information about who accessed them and from where. The trick is to make Calhoun believe he's found the evidence through his own resources, not because you led him to it, Lizzie explained as her fingers flew across the keyboard. That means creating a digital breadcrumb trail that looks like mistakes on your part, not deliberate clues. Ryan leaned forward, watching her work with fascination. Can you make it look like I've been trying to access the files from different locations? As if I'm moving around, staying ahead of him. Lizzie nodded. Exactly. We'll create digital ghosts, access attempts that seem to come from various locations, growing closer to the actual files with each attempt. By the time he follows the trail to the real evidence, he'll think he's cleverly tracked you down. As evening approached, Lizzie's partner Tricia returned home from her job as a hospital administrator. After brief introductions and a condensed explanation, she immediately stepped up to help, ordering takeout for everyone and converting their guest room for our use. Tricia and I can make some calls, Lizzie offered as we ate. We know people who might be able to help with the next phases. Secure transportation, maybe even private security if we need it. We can't involve too many people, Ryan cautioned. Every person who knows increases the risk of exposure. Trust works both ways, Trisha countered. You're asking us to risk a lot by helping you. Let us use our judgment about who else to bring in. It was a fair point, and one that highlighted another pattern in our marriage, Ryan's tendency to control information and decision-making. But this wasn't just his operation anymore. It was ours, and now it included Lizzie and Trisha as well. We trust your judgment, I said decisively, not looking at Ryan. Whatever resources you think we need, we're grateful for the help. That night, for the first time since the bank manager's call, Ryan and I slept in the same bed, not out of reconciliation, but practical necessity in the modest guest room. As we lay there in the darkness, physically close but emotionally distant, I found myself wondering about the future beyond our current crisis. What happens if we succeed? I whispered. If Calhoun is captured and the threat is gone? Ryan was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he replied, I don't know. I can't see past making sure you're safe. I mean between us, I clarified. Where does our marriage stand after all this? He turned to face me in the darkness. That's your decision as much as mine. Maybe more yours, given what I've put you through. All I know is that I want the chance to rebuild your trust, if you're willing to give it. His honesty was disarming. No defensiveness, no promises he couldn't keep. Just an acknowledgement of where we stood and a hope for the future. I don't know if I can go back to how things were, I admitted. That marriage, that life, it wasn't as perfect as I thought it was, even before Calhoun entered the picture. I don't want to go back either, Ryan said, surprising me. Back means the patterns that got us here. My need to control everything, your acceptance of half-truths, both of us living on the surface of our relationship. If we have a future together, it needs to be something new, something honest. In the quiet darkness of a borrowed bedroom, surrounded by danger yet momentarily sheltered by newfound allies, we had perhaps the most authentic conversation of our marriage. Not a resolution, there could be none yet, but an acknowledgement of truths long avoided. The next morning brought a renewed sense of purpose and the beginnings of a stronger plan. Lizzie had worked through the night, creating the digital breadcrumb trail that would lead Calhoun to our bait while establishing secure communication channels for our small but growing team. Trisha had reached out to her cousin Michael, a former Army Ranger now working in private security, who agreed to meet with us that afternoon to discuss options for the final phase, the actual confrontation with Calhoun that would either end our nightmare or escalate it beyond control. As Lizzie showed us the progress on her computer screens, the modified burner phone chimed with an alert. The first digital breadcrumb had been found and followed. Someone was beginning to trace the path we'd created. It's starting, Ryan said, his expression a mixture of dread and determination. Good, I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. Let them come. For better or worse, we were no longer hiding. We were standing our ground, building our strength, gathering allies for the fight ahead. Whatever came next, we would face it not as victims, but as architects of our own destiny. The hunt was on, but this time, we were setting the terms of engagement. Michael Sullivan arrived at Lizzie and Trisha's house precisely at noon, a punctuality that reflected his military background. He was a compact, muscular man with watchful eyes and economical movements. After formal introductions, he got straight to business. Trisha explained the basics, he said, spreading a detailed map of the Spokane area on the dining room table. You're trying to lure a dangerous criminal into a controlled confrontation using digital bait. It's bold, possibly suicidal. We're aware of the risks, Ryan replied. But hiding hasn't worked. and waiting for the FBI to catch him might take months, if they manage it at all. Michael nodded. I respect the initiative, but let's be clear about what we're dealing with. This man Calhoun, he's not just some white-collar criminal, is he? He's already had one person killed that you know of. His security chief, I confirmed. Execution style. Then he won't hesitate to do the same to you. Which means we need to create a scenario where he believes he has the advantage, while actually putting him at a significant disadvantage. Over the next 2 hours, Michael helped us transform our desperate escape plan into a tactical operation. His experience in asymmetrical conflict proved invaluable as we mapped out potential confrontation sites, escape routes, and contingency plans. We need a controlled environment, Michael explained, circling several locations on the map. Somewhere public enough that Calhoun won't try anything too brazen, but private enough that we can control access points and have clear sightlines. What about the art gallery in Riverfront Park? Lizzie suggested. My friend Nina owns it. After hours, it's private but still in a public space. Michael considered this. An art gallery provides multiple entry points, potential concealment, and is contextually appropriate for the evidence being hidden in a painting. It could work. While Lizzie contacted Nina to secure the gallery, Tricia, who turned out to have unexpected connections in Spokane's legal community, reached out to a trusted former colleague now working in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Without divulging our specific location, she arranged for a secure channel to deliver the evidence to federal authorities outside the FBI task force currently hunting for us. By evening, the digital breadcrumb trail had been followed 3 more times, each probe coming from a different IP address but with patterns that Lizzie identified as likely the same user employing various anonymizing techniques. He's careful, she noted, tracking the digital footprints. But he's definitely interested. The last attempt came closer to the actual file location. I'd estimate he'll reach the final breadcrumb within 24 to 36 hours. Then we need to be ready by tomorrow night, Ryan said, studying the gallery floor plan Nina had emailed over. We'll only get one shot at this. That night, Michael brought in 2 additional team members, former military colleagues he trusted, implicitly. Teresa Vega was a communications specialist with expertise in surveillance equipment, while David Chen was a tactical expert who had worked in close protection details after leaving the service. Our small apartment had transformed into an operations center, with equipment, maps, and plans covering every available surface. What had begun as a desperate flight from protective custody had evolved into something I'd never imagined being part of, a coordinated sting operation against a dangerous criminal. You should know the FBI is looking hard for you too, Teresa informed us after setting up her equipment. They've got bolos out across the Pacific Northwest, and they're monitoring transportation hubs and financial transactions. Have they connected us to Spokane yet? Ryan asked. Not specifically, but they're expanding their search radius. It's only a matter of time. This added urgency to our timeline. If the FBI located us before we could implement our plan, they would shut down the operation immediately and place us back in protective custody, likely with much tighter restrictions after our unauthorized departure. The following morning, we did a walkthrough of the gallery with Nina, who believed we were location scouts for a private art exhibition. The space was perfect for our purposes. A converted warehouse with high ceilings, clear sightlines, and multiple areas that could provide both concealment and tactical advantage. Michael and his team spent hours placing surveillance equipment and planning positions. By afternoon, we had a complete operational plan. Ryan would appear to be working late at the gallery, supposedly preparing for an exhibition. The digital breadcrumbs would lead Calhoun to believe the physical painting containing the evidence was being stored there temporarily before transport to a secure location. We'll have people here, here, and here, Michael explained, marking positions on the floor plan. Teresa will monitor surveillance from the back office. David and I will be concealed but able to intervene immediately if things go south. What about me? I asked, noticing my absence from the tactical assignments. The room fell silent as everyone exchanged glances. "We thought you'd be at the secure location with Lizzie and Trisha," Ryan said carefully, "ready to transmit the evidence to the U.S. Attorney's Office once Calhoun is in custody." I shook my head firmly. "No, I need to be there." "Vanessa, it's too dangerous," Ryan argued. "There's no tactical reason for you to be in the gallery." "This isn't just your fight anymore," I countered. "It hasn't been since the moment the bank manager called me. I've been living this nightmare alongside you, and I deserve to see it end." Ryan started to object again, but Michael intervened. "She has a point, and tactically, having her there might actually help sell the scenario. Calhoun will be more likely to believe Ryan is off guard if his wife is with him." After further discussion, we agreed I would be present but positioned in the gallery office with Teresa, away from the immediate confrontation area, but still able to witness the operation through the surveillance feeds. By late afternoon, Lizzie confirmed that our final digital breadcrumb had been accessed, a calendar entry for the gallery showing the supposed temporary storage location of the painting, containing the evidence. "He took the bait," she announced. "Based on the access patterns, I'd expect him to make his move tonight." As darkness fell, we moved into position at the gallery. Nina had left hours earlier, believing we were conducting some kind of surprise art event. The space had been subtly transformed, surveillance cameras disguised as part of the gallery's security system, panic buttons installed at key locations, and our team strategically positioned throughout. Ryan and I stood in the main exhibition space, making adjustments to the lighting as if preparing for a show. In reality, we were following the script Michael had prepared, establishing a believable scenario for any surveillance Calhoun might conduct before entering. "Are you afraid?" Ryan asked quietly as we worked, his voice not carrying to the hidden microphones. "Terrified," I admitted, "but also, I don't know, resolved? Like whatever happens tonight, at least we're facing it on our terms." He nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me," I corrected him. "Life did, circumstances did. And in some ways, maybe we needed this." "Needed to be hunted by a murderous criminal?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. "Needed something to break us out of the patterns we were trapped in," I clarified. "Something to force us to see each other clearly, without the facades we'd both created." Before Ryan could respond, Teresa's voice came through our concealed earpieces. "Vehicle approaching. Black SUV, tinted windows, 2 occupants." My heart rate immediately spiked. This was it, the culmination of our desperate plan. Ryan squeezed my hand briefly, then resumed adjusting the gallery lighting as if nothing had happened. "Remember the plan," Michael's calm voice instructed through the earpiece. "Normal activities. Don't react to anything until I give the signal." We continued our mundane tasks, now hyper-aware of every sound outside the gallery. According to our script, I moved toward the office where Teresa was stationed with the surveillance equipment as if going to check something on the computer. From the relative safety of the office, I watched the external camera feeds as 2 men exited the SUV. One was immediately recognizable from the FBI briefing photos. Victor Calhoun, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit despite the late hour. The other was younger, athletic-looking, with the watchful demeanor of professional security. "Calhoun confirmed," Teresa murmured into her comm. +1, likely armed, approaching main entrance." On another screen, I could see Ryan in the gallery space, now alone, reviewing papers on a clipboard, as if completely unaware of the approaching danger. Michael and David were nowhere to be seen on the cameras, having positioned themselves in prearranged blind spots. The gallery door opened, its electronic chime sounding jarringly normal in the tension-filled atmosphere. On screen, Ryan looked up, his expression shifting from concentration to shock in a perfectly executed performance. "Mr. Mitchell." Calhoun's voice came clearly through the gallery's audio system. Working late, I see. Victor, Ryan responded, his voice steady despite the visible tension in his posture. This is unexpected. The gallery's closed. Is it? I thought perhaps you were preparing a special exhibition. Something featuring unique digital art, hidden within conventional pieces. The camera angle didn't show Calhoun's face, but his voice carried a dangerous undercurrent beneath the conversational tone. I don't know what you're talking about, Ryan said, setting down his clipboard and subtly shifting his position to create distance between himself and the visitors. I think you do, Calhoun replied. My sources indicate you've been very busy lately. Accessing certain files, making preparations to share them with inappropriate parties. The younger man with Calhoun had begun moving laterally, positioning himself to block any escape route to the rear of the gallery. His right hand rested inside his jacket in a telltale position that suggested he was armed. Your sources are mistaken, Ryan said. I'm just helping with an upcoming exhibition. Calhoun laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humor. Always the marketing man, aren't you? Creating narratives, selling stories. But we're past that now, Ryan. Where is the painting? What painting? The one containing the files you stole. From me. The one with the evidence you think gives you leverage. Calhoun's voice hardened. I won't ask again. Through my earpiece, I heard Michael's calm instruction. Hold positions. Not yet. On screen, Ryan maintained his confused expression. Victor, I honestly don't know what you're talking about. I'm just here working on... The sharp crack of a slap interrupted him as Calhoun struck him across the face. The sudden violence made me flinch, though Ryan had been prepared for this possibility. Enough games, Calhoun snarled, his sophisticated veneer cracking. My patience is exhausted. Nikolai, search the office. The painting must be here somewhere. The younger man, Nikolai, nodded and moved toward the office where Teresa and I were concealed. My heart hammered in my chest as he approached. This deviation from our expected scenario hadn't been accounted for in the plan. He's coming to the office, Teresa whispered urgently into her comm. Need intervention. Negative, Michael's voice replied. Wait for confirmation he's armed. Before we move, we need clear justification. As Nikolai reached for the office door handle, Teresa quickly motioned me underneath the desk, positioning herself at the computer as if working alone. The door swung open, revealing Nikolai's imposing figure. Who are you? He demanded, his accent faintly Eastern European. Gallery assistant, Teresa replied calmly, not looking up from the computer. Mr. Mitchell has me updating the exhibition. Catalog. Nikolai surveyed the office, his gaze sweeping past the desk where I was hidden. Is there a storage room? A place for artwork not currently displayed? In the back, Teresa answered, pointing toward the rear of the gallery, through the main space and past the sculpture installation. He studied her for a moment, then seemed to accept her explanation. Stay here, do not move. As he turned to leave, the movement of his jacket revealed what we'd been waiting for, the distinctive shape of a handgun in a shoulder holster. Confirmed armed, Teresa whispered into her comm once Nikolai had exited. Both suspects armed and threatening. Gallery personnel. Execute Phase 2, came Michael's immediate response. In the main gallery space, Ryan had remained under Calhoun's watchful eye. Now, following the predetermined plan, he shifted tactics. All right, Victor, he said, raising his hands slightly in a placating gesture. Let's talk about this rationally. What exactly do you think I have, and what would it take to resolve this situation peacefully? Calhoun's posture relaxed slightly at this apparent capitulation. Finally, some sense. What I think you have are files documenting certain financial transactions and communications that were never meant to be recorded. Files that could create complications for many important people. And if I did have such files? Ryan asked, carefully. What then? Then we would negotiate a mutually beneficial arrangement, Calhoun replied smoothly. One that would allow you and your charming wife to resume your normal lives, free from any concerns about your future safety. And I'm just supposed to trust your word on that? After what happened to Anton Resnick? Calhoun's eyes narrowed dangerously. Unfortunate business decisions lead to unfortunate consequences, Ryan. You should understand that better than most. While they spoke, Nikolai had returned from his brief search and was making his way along the perimeter of the gallery, examining artwork and checking behind larger pieces for hidden items. The painting isn't in the main storage area, he reported to Calhoun. Perhaps upstairs? There is no upstairs in this building, Ryan corrected. It's a single-level warehouse conversion. Calhoun's expression darkened. You're stalling. Where is the painting, Ryan? Where is the evidence? Before Ryan could answer, the gallery lights suddenly dimmed, then brightened again, the prearranged signal that our backup had arrived. Through my earpiece, Teresa relayed updates from outside. U.S. Marshals in position, local PD establishing perimeter. Unaware of the closing trap, Calhoun grew increasingly agitated. Enough games, he snapped, reaching inside his jacket and drawing a small silver pistol. For the last time, where is the evidence? It's not here, Victor, Ryan said calmly, despite the weapon now pointed at him. It never was. You're lying. No, you were misled. The painting exists, but it's secure elsewhere. What's here is something else entirely. Evidence of this encounter, being recorded and transmitted in real time to federal authorities. Calhoun's eyes darted around the gallery, finally noticing the inconspicuous cameras positioned throughout the space. His face contorted with rage. You set me up, he snarled. Yes, Ryan acknowledged simply, just like you set me up 2 years ago. At that moment, Michael's voice rang out from the shadows at the rear of the gallery. Federal agents, drop your weapons, you're surrounded! What followed was a blur of motion and sound. Nikolai immediately reached for his weapon, only to be tackled by David emerging from behind a sculpture. Calhoun, panicked but calculating even now, grabbed Ryan and pressed the pistol to his head. Stay back, he shouted. I'll kill him! From my hidden position in the office, I watched in horror as the situation escalated. This wasn't part of the plan. Ryan was supposed to be clear of danger before the confrontation reached this point. It's over, Calhoun, Michael called, his own weapon trained on the cornered criminal. The building is surrounded. There's no way out. There's always a way out, Calhoun retorted, backing toward the gallery entrance with Ryan as his human shield. And Mr. Mitchell is my ticket. Through the earpiece, I heard the urgent communications between Michael and the U.S. Marshals outside. They were trying to coordinate a response that wouldn't endanger Ryan, but Calhoun was moving quickly, dragging my husband toward the exit. In that moment, watching the man I'd been married to for 12 years facing death because of choices we'd both made, I made a decision of my own. Against all protocols and plans, I emerged from the office. Victor, I called out, stepping into the main gallery space. All eyes turned to me. Michael's alarmed, Ryan's horrified, and Calhoun's calculating. Mrs. Mitchell, Calhoun said, a slow smile spreading across his face. What a pleasant surprise. Perhaps you can convince your husband to be more cooperative. I can do better than that, I replied steadily. I can tell you exactly where the evidence is. Ryan's expression was frantic. Vanessa, don't. Quiet, Calhoun snapped, pressing the gun harder against Ryan's temple. Let your wife speak. I took a deliberate step forward, ignoring Michael's subtle headshake warning me back. The evidence isn't in a painting in a gallery. It's in a painting in our home. My painting, the blue and green abstract of the Oregon coast. Ryan hid it, there, thinking I'd never know. Calhoun studied me, trying to determine if I was telling the truth. Why would you tell me this? Why betray your husband's secret? Because I want this to be over, I said, letting genuine exhaustion and fear show in my voice. I want my life back, and if giving you what you want makes that happen, then so be it. For a moment, the gallery was silent, except for the faint sounds of movement outside as law enforcement positioned themselves. Calhoun's grip on Ryan loosened slightly as he processed this new information. That momentary distraction was all Michael needed. A signal I couldn't see must have passed between him and Ryan, because suddenly Ryan dropped his weight, ducking down as Michael fired a single shot that caught Calhoun in the shoulder of his gun arm. The criminal's weapon clattered to the floor. As he cried out in pain, Ryan rolled away, and in an instant, the gallery was swarming with U.S. Marshals who had been waiting for the opportunity to breach. Calhoun and Nikolai were quickly subdued and handcuffed, their rights being read to them as medical personnel attended to Calhoun's wound. Ryan rushed to me, enfolding me in an embrace so tight it nearly crushed the breath from my lungs. That was incredibly reckless, he whispered into my hair, and incredibly brave. I learned from the best, I replied, my voice muffled against his chest. As the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, a new complication arrived in the form of FBI agents Delgado and Miller, who entered the gallery with expressions that mixed relief and severe disapproval. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell," Delgado said crisply, "you have a lot of explaining to do." Looking at the chaos around us, federal agents securing criminals, evidence being documented, the elaborate trap we'd helped create, I couldn't help but laugh, a slightly hysterical sound that bubbled up from the stress and fear of the past week. "Yes," I agreed, still holding tightly to Ryan. "I suppose we do." The hours following Calhoun's capture were a blur of debriefings, explanations, and negotiations. Agent Delgado was furious about our escape from protective custody and unauthorized operation, while Agent Miller seemed torn between professional disapproval and reluctant admiration for what we'd accomplished. We were escorted to the FBI field office in downtown Spokane, where we spent the night in separate interview rooms explaining our actions to increasingly higher-ranking officials. By morning, the situation had evolved from potential criminal charges against us for obstruction to grudging acknowledgement that our actions had secured a priority federal target. Lizzie, Trisha, and Michael's team were debriefed separately and sworn to secrecy about their involvement. The FBI was eager to contain knowledge of how completely two civilians had circumvented their protective protocols and orchestrated an independent operation. A week after Calhoun's arrest, we were allowed to return to Seattle under continued but less restrictive protection. Our house had been thoroughly searched by both Calhoun's people and later the FBI, but the damage was minimal and primarily confined to my studio, where the painting containing the hidden evidence had been sliced from its frame and taken into evidence. Standing in the doorway of our bedroom, looking at the familiar space that now felt like it belonged to different people, I was struck by how fundamentally we had changed in such a short time. "It doesn't feel like home anymore," I said, as Ryan joined me. "No," he agreed. "Too many secrets lived here. Too many things left unsaid." I turned to face him directly. "So what now? For us, I mean." It was the question we'd been circling since the confrontation at the gallery, the future of our marriage now that the immediate danger had passed. We were different people than we had been before the bank manager's call, both individually and as a couple. The old patterns had been shattered for better or worse. Ryan took my hands in his, a gesture that felt both intimate and respectful of the distance that remained between us. "I think that's entirely up to you, Vanessa. I know what I want, but I've made enough unilateral decisions for both of us." "What do you want?" I asked, genuinely curious. "A second chance," he said simply. "Not to go back to what we were, but to build something new, something honest, where you know all of me, not just the parts I wanted to show you." I considered. his words carefully. The anger and betrayal I'd felt initially had transformed through our shared ordeal. It wasn't gone. Trust, once broken, couldn't be instantly restored, but it had evolved into something more complex. Understanding, perhaps. Compassion. And, yes, still love, though a different kind than before. I think I'd like that, I said finally. A fresh start. But not here. Not in this house with all its ghosts. Relief flooded his features. We could look for a new place, or even a new city if you want a complete change. The idea was appealing, leaving behind the physical reminders of deception and danger, creating a clean slate for whatever came next. Yet I also recognized that running away wasn't the answer. We would bring ourselves wherever we went, changed but still carrying our histories. Let's start smaller, I suggested. A rental somewhere in the city while we figure out what's next, and I hesitated, then committed to the thought. I think we should try therapy. Real therapy, not just crisis management. Ryan nodded. I'd like that. I think we both have patterns to understand and change if we're going to build something better. 3 months later, we were settled into a bright apartment in Capitol Hill with views of the city and mountains beyond. The FBI protection had ended once the last of Calhoun's major associates was arrested. The promised special oversight of the corruption investigation seemed to be working. Every few weeks, news broke of another arrest or indictment of public. Officials and corporate executives connected to the money laundering network. Our life had found a new rhythm. Ryan had sold his marketing firm, unwilling to return to the industry that had led him into Calhoun's path. Instead, he was consulting on security protocols for small businesses, helping them avoid the kind of vulnerabilities he had once exploited as a marketer. I had returned to teaching but was also pursuing my own art more seriously, with an upcoming exhibition featuring works that explored themes of perception, deception, and transformation. Weekly therapy sessions, both individual and as a couple, were helping us understand the patterns that had shaped our marriage and develop healthier ways of communicating. It wasn't always easy. Old habits of control and avoidance resurfaced regularly, but we were committed to the process of rebuilding. On a crisp autumn morning, almost exactly 6 months after the bank manager's fateful call, I sat on our apartment balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint, the sky in vivid pinks and oranges. Ryan joined me, setting a small package on the table between us. "What's this?" I asked, curious. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside was a delicate silver pendant on a chain, similar to the one that had once contained the backup decryption key, but new and untainted by those associations. "It's beautiful," I said, lifting it from the box. "But not our anniversary or my birthday." "It's for a different kind of milestone," Ryan explained. 6 months since everything changed. I wanted to mark it, not as an ending or beginning, but as part of our continuing journey. As I put on the necklace, I reflected on how far we'd come. The woman who had answered that phone call from Diane Reynolds at Pacific Northwest Bank seemed like a stranger now, someone who had accepted limitations without question, who had mistaken comfort for happiness. I was thinking about that bank manager recently, I said, fingering the pendant. If she hadn't called me that day, if the transfer had gone through as planned, we might still be living in blissful ignorance. Or I might be in prison and you might be divorced and bitter, Ryan countered with a wry smile. The FBI operation wasn't going as smoothly as I pretended. Either way, that call changed everything. It was like being forced awake from a dream I didn't know I was having. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "Do you regret it? Any of it? Knowing what you know now, would you rather have stayed asleep?" I considered the question seriously, thinking about all we'd been through. The fear, the danger, the painful revelations, but also the growth, the newfound strength, the deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. "No," I said finally. "The truth is always better, even when it hurts. even when it's not what you expected or wanted. At least it's real. To the truth, then, Ryan said, raising his coffee mug in a toast. However uncomfortable it might be. I clinked my mug against his, to the truth, and to us, the real us, still discovering who that might be. As the sun cleared the horizon, bathing the city in golden light, I felt a sense of peace that had nothing to do with false security or comfortable illusions. We had survived the unthinkable, not just the danger from Calhoun, but the collapse of the carefully constructed facade that had been our marriage. What remained was imperfect, still healing, but authentic in a way it had never been before. That bank manager's call had indeed transferred our life savings, not to a mistress, but to a new account of hard-won wisdom and genuine connection. Some fortunes, I had discovered, couldn't be measured in dollars. The most valuable inheritance was the courage to face truth, to embrace change, and to begin again with eyes wide open. Whatever came next, and life would surely bring new challenges and crises, we would face it together, no longer hiding behind perfect masks, but standing side by side as our real, flawed, resilient selves. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd once believed in, but it was something far more precious. A true story, with all its messy complications and unexpected turns, written by two people who had finally learned how to be honest, with each other and with themselves. The call that I had initially seen as the end of my world had actually been the beginning of a better one. Not perfect, not unblemished, but real. And in that reality, however complex, I had found a strength and clarity I never knew I possessed. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to clear away the debris of comforting illusions. Sometimes it takes a complete collapse to build something stronger. And sometimes it takes a bank manager's phone call to begin the journey toward an authentic life. You took unconscionable risks, Assistant Director Phillips told us when we were finally allowed to meet together in a conference room. He was a stern-faced man in his 50s who had flown in from Seattle specifically to deal with our case. But I can't argue with the results. Calhoun in custody, his network exposed, and evidence secured that will lead to multiple additional arrests. Ryan nodded tiredly. We were both exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and stale coffee. After nearly 36 hours without sleep, what happens now? Now we clean up the mess, Phillips replied bluntly. The official story will be that your escape from the safe house was part of a sanctioned operation to draw out Calhoun. The Bureau can't publicly admit that two civilians orchestrated a more effective sting than our task force managed in 18 months. I almost laughed at the irony. Another facade, another carefully constructed narrative to maintain appearances. Some patterns ran deeper than just our marriage. They were woven into the fabric of institutions as well. And the evidence? Ryan asked. The files implicating public officials and corporate executives? Phillips's expression tightened. Those will be handled through appropriate channels. I assure you, anyone involved in criminal activity will face justice. With all due respect, I interjected, finding courage I wouldn't have had a week ago. We've heard similar assurances before. What guarantee do we have that the appropriate channels won't bury evidence that might embarrass powerful people? The assistant director studied me with new interest. Mrs. Mitchell, you've demonstrated remarkable adaptability this past week, but this is now a federal matter being handled by experienced professionals. The evidence doesn't just exist in the painting, Ryan said quietly. There are secure backups that will automatically release to journalists and independent prosecutors if certain conditions aren't met. It was a bluff. We had discussed such fail-safes with Lizzie but hadn't had time to implement them. Nevertheless, Phillips's momentary expression of alarm suggested the tactic was effective. That would be extremely unwise, he warned. Potentially obstruction of justice. Then ensure justice isn't obstructed, I countered. Full investigation, transparent process, no matter where the evidence leads. After a tense standoff, Phillips agreed to assign special oversight to the broader corruption investigation and to keep us informed of significant developments, concessions he clearly resented making to civilians who had upended his agency's operation. By afternoon, we were released into a new type of protective custody, this time in a comfortable hotel suite rather than a remote cabin, with 2 agents stationed outside our door instead of inside with us. The threat from Calhoun was effectively neutralized, but his network remained, and until all arrests were completed, we would remain under protection. Alone for the first time since the gallery confrontation, Ryan and I collapsed onto the suite's sofa, the weight of the past week finally crashing down on us. "I can't believe we pulled it off," he said softly, staring at the ceiling. "I can't believe I helped you pull it off," I replied. "A week ago, I was grading student portfolios and planning a faculty meeting. Now I've helped capture a criminal mastermind and blackmailed an FBI assistant director." Ryan turned to look at me, a smile tugging at his lips despite his exhaustion. "You were magnificent, you know. The way you stood up to Calhoun, to the FBI. I've never seen that side of you before." "It was always there," I reflected. "Just dormant, waiting for the right catalyst. Like a bank manager's phone call? Like discovering your husband isn't who you thought he was, for better and worse." We fell into companionable silence, too tired for deep conversation but comforted by each other's presence in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. Over the next several days, news of Calhoun's arrest broke nationally, though the specifics were heavily redacted. The official story portrayed it as the culmination of a long-term FBI operation, with only vague mentions of cooperating witnesses that gave no hint of our central role. This suited us perfectly. Anonymity meant safety as the investigation expanded to Calhoun's broader network. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.